The kid with the $12,000 precision rifle lowered his scope and shook his head like a man calling time of death. Just leave that target, sir. Trust me, it is impossible. I put 40 rounds of match grade 280 Ackley into that plate this month, and I cannot hit it on the swing. The chain is garbage. The wind is garbage. Save your ammo. The crowd around him murmured agreement because the crowd always agrees with the kid holding the most expensive rifle. And then a voice from the back of the firing line, quiet and unhurried, said, "I will give it a try, son." Everybody turned. The man who had spoken was small and thin and about 74 years old, wearing a faded canvas jacket and a plain black ball cap with no logo on it. And he was holding, and this was the part that made the kid actually laugh out loud before he could catch himself, a wood-stocked air rifle. A pellet gun. The kind of thing a grandfather buys to scare crows off his vegetable garden. The kid grinned at his friends. "Old-timer, I do not know what game you think we are playing here, but that is a pellet rifle. And that target is 75 yards downrange on a moving chain in a 10-mile-an-hour crosswind. You are not going to hit it." The old man did not answer. He just walked slowly toward the firing line, shouldered the pellet rifle, and lowered his right cheek onto the worn walnut stock. And what every single person on that firing line was about to witness, including one very specific older man standing in the back row who had just turned the color of cold ash because he recognized the way those weathered hands were holding. That rifle was a kind of marksmanship that the United States government used to classify at a level most of them had never heard of. If you believe some old men are walking around with skills the world has forgotten how to measure, do me a favor right now and type the words "eyes on down" in the comments, because the next 30 seconds are about to remind everyone on that firing line what the word sniper used to actually mean. His name was Marcus Delano Coleman, and the reason he was at Ironwood Long Range on that cool Saturday morning in October was because his wife had been dead for 11 months and the silence in the cabin had finally gotten louder than he could stand. Marcus lived alone now in a small log house he had built with his own hands in 1996 on a piece of forested ground up in the Blue Ridge, about 2 hours' drive from the range. He was 74 years old, 6'1", and about 165 pounds, dripping wet, with a kind of lean frame that you see on men who walked a lot of ridge lines in their younger years and never quite lost the habit of carrying nothing they did not need. His hair was white and cropped close under the ball cap. His eyes were dark brown and very steady, the kind of eyes that did not blink much, the kind of eyes that a woman had once told him a long time ago looked like river stones. That woman had been his wife, Gloria, and she had said it to him on their third date in 1973, and he had carried the compliment around in his chest for 50 years afterward, like a smooth, flat pebble he could reach for whenever the world got too loud. Gloria had died the previous November. Pancreatic cancer, quick and merciless. Marcus had sat in the hospital room holding her hand for the last 4 days of her life, and then he had driven himself home, and he had not fired a rifle of any kind since that morning, because every time he picked one up, his hands remembered her, and his eyes would not clear. The pellet rifle in the back of his truck on that Saturday morning was the first rifle he had touched in almost a year. He had not gone to Ironwood to shoot. He had gone there to be around the smell of gun oil and the sound of rifles in the clean mountain air, because those were the last sounds he could still bear hearing without thinking about Gloria every single second. He had no intention of stepping onto the firing line. He had no intention of letting anyone know he was even there. Nobody on that range that morning had any idea that the quiet old man in the faded canvas jacket had once been listed in a classified Department of Defense training roster under the designation instructor, Level 4 Extended Range Precision, and that the last time he had put a round downrange in anger, he had been 742 meters from a target that no longer exists on any map. The cabin where Marcus lived had been Gloria's dream before it became his reality. Back in 1995, when they were both still working, she teaching second grade at the elementary school in town, and he working as a part-time instructor at a private security training facility, Gloria had come home one evening with a real estate listing she had torn out of the local paper. It was 40 acres of wooded hillside in the Blue Ridge, with a view of the Western Ridge and a spring-fed creek running through the bottomland. She had spread the listing out on the kitchen table of their rental house and said, "Marcus, honey, I want us to build something that is ours, something we make with our own hands." Marcus had looked at the listing and then at Gloria, and he had seen in her eyes that this was not a passing fancy. This was something she needed. So he had said, "All right, sweetheart, let us go look at it." They had bought the land in January of 1996, 40 acres for $32,000, which was every penny they had saved in 15 years of marriage. And then Marcus had spent the next 8 months building the cabin. He had done most of the work himself, cutting timber from their own land, hauling stone from the creek for the foundation and the chimney, learning carpentry from library books and from an old man named Ernest who lived down the mountain and who would come up on Saturdays to show Marcus how to frame a roof and how to hang a door so it did not bind in the winter. Gloria had been there every day after school, hauling boards, mixing mortar, painting trim. She had chosen the gray paint for the porch because she said it reminded her of the house where she had grown up in South Carolina. And she had planted the garden that first spring with tomatoes and peppers and okra and collard greens. And she had sat in a folding chair in the evenings while Marcus worked, and she had read to him from books she brought home from the school library. By September of 1996, the cabin was finished. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a wood stove, a living room with a stone fireplace, and that porch where Gloria would sit every evening for the next 27 years and watch the sun go down over the Western Ridge. They had moved in on a Saturday, and that night they had lain in their bed and listened to the wind in the trees, and Gloria had said, "Marcus, honey, we did it. We built something." And Marcus had said, "Yes, we did, sweetheart. Yes, we did." The cabin had been their whole world for almost 3 decades. Marcus had retired from the security training facility in 2002. Gloria had retired from teaching in 2008. And after that, they had rarely left the mountain except for groceries and doctor appointments. They had everything they needed right there: the garden, the creek, the woods, each other. Marcus had taught Gloria to shoot with the air rifle in the late 70s. She had been nervous at first. She had grown up in a house where there were no guns, and her father had been a Baptist minister who preached that violence in any form was a sin. But Gloria had also been a practical woman, and she had said to Marcus one evening, "I know you have seen things and done things that I will never understand, and I know those things still live inside you. So if shooting tin cans helps you, then I want to learn how to shoot tin cans too. That way we can do it together." So Marcus had set up a range in the backyard, 25 yards, tin cans on a wooden frame. And he had taught Gloria the same way he had taught young soldiers at Fort Benning: breathing, sight picture, trigger squeeze. She had been a good student, patient, careful, and within a few months she could hit a Coke can at 25 yards 5 times out of 5. They had made it a Saturday morning ritual: coffee on the porch at dawn, then out to the backyard range with the air rifle. Marcus would shoot 5 rounds, then Gloria would shoot 5 rounds. They did not keep score. They did not compete. They just shot. And when they were done, Marcus would collect the cans, and Gloria would make breakfast, and they would sit on the porch and watch the day come up over the ridge. That ritual had continued for almost 40 years, until November of 2023, until the morning Gloria woke up with pain in her abdomen that would not go away, until the doctor said pancreatic cancer stage 4, until the oncologist said 6 months, maybe less, until Marcus found himself sitting in a hospital room holding Gloria's hand and watching her fade a little more each day. She had died on a Tuesday, early morning. Marcus had been dozing in the chair beside her bed, and when he woke up, she was gone. Just like that. One moment she was breathing, the next moment she was not. The nurse had come in and checked for a pulse and shaken her head. And Marcus had sat there holding Gloria's hand for another hour because he did not know what else to do. The funeral had been small. Gloria had not wanted a big production. She had left specific instructions: no open casket, no long eulogies, just a graveside service with a few words from the minister, and then back to the cabin for coffee and pound cake. Marcus had followed her instructions exactly. And afterward, when everyone had left, he had walked out to the backyard range, and he had picked up the air rifle and he had tried to shoot. But his hands had been shaking, and his eyes had been blurred with tears, and he had set the rifle down and walked back into the cabin, and he had not touched it again until that Saturday morning in October, when something in him had finally broken through the grief and said, "Marcus, you need to go to the range." Ironwood Long Range was the kind of place that took itself seriously. It sat on a 200-acre parcel of rolling land about 40 minutes outside of a mid-sized town in western North Carolina, built into the shoulder of a low ridge with firing positions out to 1,000 yards on the main line and a series of smaller bays cut into the terrain for tactical courses and specialty shooting. The range had been built in 2010 by a man named Richard Donovan, who had served in the Army in the 90s and had come home wanting to create a place where serious shooters could train. Not a weekend plink and chat club, but a real range, with distance, with challenges, with standards. Richard had poured $200,000 of his own money into the place, grading the land, building the berms, installing the target systems, putting up a small office building with a classroom and a bathroom and a vending machine that sold coffee that tasted like battery acid but was hot and strong. The clientele was a mix of serious long-range hobbyists, retired military men, a handful of active duty shooters who drove up from Fort Bragg on weekends, and in the last 3 or 4 years, a growing number of young men with expensive scopes and YouTube channels who had decided that precision rifle was the new golf. Richard tolerated the YouTube crowd because they paid their range fees and they generally followed the rules. But his heart belonged to the old-timers, the veterans, the men who had learned to shoot when ammunition was expensive and every round mattered. The weekend crowd that Saturday was thicker than usual because there was a mild, unofficial competition going on for bragging rights on a particular target that Richard had installed about 6 months ago and had quietly started calling in private conversation with his regulars the Whisper. The Whisper was a 2-inch steel plate round about the diameter of a coffee cup lid hanging from a 12-inch length of welded chain off a horizontal bar driven into the hillside at exactly 75 yards from the firing line. The chain was the whole joke. Any breath of wind, any vibration from a nearby rifle, any thump of boots on the range deck, and the Whisper would sway in its own private, unpredictable rhythm, the kind of rhythm that made calculated leads almost useless and demanded that the shooter read the swing itself in real time. Hitting a 2-inch plate at 75 yards with a precision rifle was not hard. Any competent shooter with a decent rifle could do it if the plate was stationary. But hitting the Whisper while it was swinging in a variable breeze was hard enough that exactly 4 shooters had done it since Richard had put it up. And 3 of those 4 had done it on the second or third attempt, which most real marksmen considered a matter of luck rather than skill. Richard had stopped offering a prize for hitting it because he did not want to give away any more ammunition cans. He had started with a standing offer of a 50-round box of match-grade ammunition to anyone who could hit it on the first shot. But after the third shooter claimed the prize, Richard realized he was going to go broke if he kept that up. So he quietly retired the offer and just let the target stand as its own challenge. What every shooter on the range knew without being told was that the Whisper was not really about hitting a small target at a medium distance. The Whisper was about reading a moving system you did not control. It was about patience, about timing, about understanding that there are some things in this world that will not bend to your will, and the only way to succeed is to bend yourself to them. Most shooters, no matter how much their rifle cost, could not raid what they could not control. And so most shooters miss the Whisper, and then they blame the wind or the chain or the target itself. Jamal Patterson was 26 years old, and he was by any reasonable measure a very good shooter. He had served 4 years as designated marksman in a line infantry company in the United States Marine Corps, had done 1 deployment, to Helmand Province in Afghanistan and had gotten out 18 months ago to pursue what he was now describing on his growing social media accounts as a career in precision shooting content creation. The phrase content creation was one that Jamal had picked up from a seminar he had attended in Charlotte 6 months earlier. The seminar had been called Building Your Brand in the Tactical Space, and it had been full of young veterans like himself who were trying to turn their military experience into a paycheck. The instructors had talked about engagement metrics and algorithm optimization and monetization strategies, and Jamal had taken notes and nodded and told himself that this was the future, that the days of working a regular job were over, that if he could just get his subscriber count high enough, he could make a living doing what he loved. And what Jamal loved was shooting. He loved the precision of it, the math of it, the way a good shot felt like solving an equation. He loved the gear, the rifles and the scopes and the ballistic calculators. He loved talking about gear, comparing gear, reviewing gear. And he loved the respect that came from being good at something, from being the guy other guys came to for advice. His rifle that morning was genuinely impressive. A custom-built bolt gun in .280 Ackley, improved, fitted into a modular aluminum chassis that had cost $4,000. The barrel alone had cost $1,200. It was a Bartlett 5R hand-lapped stainless steel barrel that the gunsmith in Asheville had promised would shoot half-minute of angle out to 600 yards if Jamal did his part. The stock was an XLR Element chassis in flat dark earth. The trigger was a Timney Calvin Elite set at 1.5 pounds. The scope was a Vortex Razor Gen 36 to 36 power with an EBR 7C reticle, and it had cost $3,200. Jamal had financed the rifle through a credit card promotional offer. 0% interest for 18 months. He had told himself it was an investment, that he needed professional-grade equipment if he was going to build a professional-grade channel. And for the most part, that logic had worked out. His subscriber count had grown from 12,000 to 180,000 in the past year. The rifle looked good on camera, it performed well, and the optics company that made his scope had reached out 3 months ago with a sponsorship offer. Not a big one, just a 15% discount code he could share with his followers and a small commission on every sale. But it was something. It was validation. Jamal had been working the Whisper for about an hour when Marcus Coleman first noticed him. It was hard not to notice Jamal. He was a big man, 6'2" and 220 pounds of muscle that he maintained with a strict routine of lifting and running and meal prep. He wore a neatly trimmed beard, a backward baseball cap with the logo of his sponsor, and a tactical shirt with his channel name embroidered on the chest. J-Rock Precision. The kid was a good shooter. Marcus could see that immediately. His fundamentals were clean, good bone support, steady trigger break, no flinch in the follow-through. He had clearly been trained well. The Marine Corps did a good job with their designated marksmen. Better than the Army in some ways. The Marines understood that marksmanship was a perishable skill, and they made their shooters train constantly. But Marcus could also see from the back of the firing line, where he was standing quietly with a cup of vending machine coffee in his hand, that the kid was shooting the wrong problem. The kid was trying to calculate the Whisper. Marcus could see him punch numbers into his realistic solver every time he came up off the scope. Wind speed, wind direction, target distance, ammunition data. The kid was treating the Whisper like a math problem, like something that could be solved with the right formula. But the Whisper was not a calculation problem. The Whisper was a patience problem. It was a listening problem. It was a problem that required you to stop thinking and start feeling. And Jamal Patterson was not a man who had learned to stop thinking. He was a man who had built his entire identity around thinking, around being smart, around having the right answer. Marcus watched him miss 3 shots in a row, the impacts kicking up little puffs of dirt on the berm behind the plate, and he watched the kid lift his head from the scope and laugh in the self-mocking way young men laugh when they are actually genuinely frustrated but do not want anyone to know it. And Marcus heard the kids say loud enough for everyone on the line to hear, "That thing is impossible. The chain is garbage. I am telling you boys, nobody is hitting that in these conditions. I will put 500 bucks on it right now. 500 to any man on this line who can hit that plate in the next 10 minutes." And then because Jamal Patterson was a kid with a growing audience and an instinct for generating content, he pulled out his phone and started recording. He held the phone at arm's length with the camera facing himself, and he put on what Marcus recognized as his video voice. The voice was deeper than his normal speaking voice, more confident, more polished. It was the voice of a man performing rather than talking. "Look at this," he said to the camera. 75 yards, 2-inch plate, swinging chain, 10-mile crosswind. I have put 40 rounds into this thing this month. 40 rounds of match-grade ammunition, $160 worth of ammo, and I cannot touch it. $500 says nobody here can hit it either. This is what we call in the business an impossible shot. Not because the distance is hard, but because the movement is random. There is no pattern to read, no rhythm to time. It is pure chaos, and chaos cannot be calculated. So yeah, impossible. Jamal lowered the phone and looked around at the small crowd that had gathered to watch him. About 15 men, most of them younger guys in their 20s and 30s, a few older men in their 50s. All of them nodded and murmured agreement because Jamal had just articulated what they were all thinking. The target was impossible, not because they were bad shooters, but because the target itself was unfair. Marcus Coleman had spent most of his professional life being a man who did not call attention to himself. He had been trained at a specific level very few Americans ever reached to understand that the worst thing a sniper could ever do was be seen. Not just physically seen, but seen in any way. Noticed, remembered, talked about. The best snipers were ghosts. They moved through the world without leaving footprints. They did their work and then they disappeared. And no one ever knew they had been there. Marcus had carried that training out of the military and into the rest of his life, and it had shaped everything. The way he drove, never speeding, never drawing attention from cops. The way he ordered coffee, always polite, always generic. Black coffee, no sugar, nothing memorable. The way he dressed, plain jeans, plain shirts, plain jacket, nothing with logos, nothing that stood out. The way he had loved his wife, quietly, privately. He had never been the kind of man to make public declarations or grand gestures. He had shown Gloria his love through small, consistent actions. A cup of coffee made the way she liked it. Her favorite chair positioned just right on the porch. The garden weeded before she asked. And the way he had raised his daughter, teaching her by example rather than by lecture, showing her how to be steady, how to be reliable, how to keep her word. His daughter Denise was 42 now, living in Atlanta, working as a nurse, married to a good man named Jerome who sold insurance. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, teenagers now. Marcus saw them 3 or 4 times a year. Usually they drove up to the cabin for a weekend. Sometimes Marcus and Gloria would drive down to Atlanta. Denise had taken the news of Gloria's death hard. She had wanted to come up and stay at the cabin with Marcus after the funeral. She had said, "Daddy, you should not be alone right now." But Marcus had told her no. He had said, "Sweetheart, I appreciate it, but I need some time. I need to figure out how to be in this house without your mama. And I cannot do that if you are here worrying about me." Denise had argued. She had said, "Daddy, that is exactly when you need family around." But Marcus had been firm. And eventually Denise had gone back to Atlanta. And Marcus had been alone. And the silence had gotten louder and louder and louder. Until that Saturday morning in October when he had finally heard Gloria's voice cut through the silence and say, "Marcus, honey, go to the range." Marcus did not speak it up in rooms. Marcus did not volunteer opinions. Marcus did not correct younger men when they were wrong because he had learned a long time ago that most younger men had to be wrong in their own time before they could be right in anyone else's. You could not teach a man something he was not ready to learn. You could only show him the path and let him walk it himself, or not walk it. That was his choice. And that Saturday morning at Ironwood Long Range, standing at the back of the firing line with his vending machine coffee going cold in his hand, Marcus had every intention of keeping his mouth shut and walking back to his truck and driving home to his empty cabin and being the kind of old man that nobody on that range would ever remember having met. Just another old guy who came and went without leaving a mark. But then the kid with the expensive rifle said the word impossible. He said it twice. He said it loud. And he said it with that particular tone of smug certainty that young men use when they have convinced themselves that their failure is actually wisdom. And something in the particular way the kid said it reached across 50 years and touched a nerve inside Marcus Coleman that had not been touched in a very long time. Because once in a very different country, in a very different war, Marcus had been told by a senior officer that a particular target was impossible too. And Marcus had believed that officer, had accepted the word impossible as fact. And because of that acceptance, 4 American soldiers had spent an extra 3 days in enemy captivity before a different team made a different plan and got them out. 4 men who should have been free on Tuesday had stayed prisoners until Friday. And one of those men had been beaten severely during those 3 extra days, beaten badly enough that he had never fully recovered, never regained full use of his right arm. Marcus had learned later, through unofficial channels, that the senior officer who had called the shot impossible had done so not because it was genuinely impossible, but because he did not want to risk his men on a high-profile mission that might fail. The officer had been up for promotion, had been worried about his record, and so he had hidden his cowardice behind the word impossible. And 4 men had paid the price. Marcus had never forgotten that, had never forgotten what it felt like to stand in the briefing room and hear a man with rank and authority declare something impossible, and then watch that same man accept a commendation 6 months later for unrelated actions. The word impossible had become to Marcus a kind of betrayal, a lie that people told to excuse their own unwillingness to try. And standing there in the back of the firing line at Ironwood on a cool October morning in his 74th year, Marcus Coleman felt Gloria's absence in his chest like a held breath. And he thought of her river stone compliment about his eyes, the steady eyes that did not blink much, the eyes that had seen things most people would never see. And he thought of what Gloria would say if she were standing next to him right now, watching that cocky kid pronounce something impossible that was not impossible. And Marcus knew exactly what Gloria would say. Gloria would not say anything directly. She never did. Gloria had her own way of telling Marcus what to do without actually telling him. She would look at him with those soft brown eyes, and she would smile that small, private smile, and she would say in a voice barely above a whisper, "Marcus, honey." And that was all. Just those 2 words, "Marcus, honey." And Marcus would know exactly what she meant. What she meant was, I see what you see. I know what you know. And I know you are thinking about walking away because walking away is what you do. But this time, I want you to stay. This time, I want you to show them. Not because you need to prove anything, but because that boy needs to learn. And you are the only one here who can teach him. So Marcus set his coffee cup down on the empty bench behind him, and he turned around and walked back across the gravel lot toward his truck. And nobody on that firing line paid him any attention at all. Just another old man leaving early, probably too cold for him, and probably hurts to stand that long. What Marcus lifted out of the back of his Tacoma a minute and a half later was to his own eyes an old friend, and to the eyes of anyone who knew air rifles a genuinely serious piece of precision equipment. It was a German-made spring piston air rifle, Diana Model 35, wood-stocked in beech that had been worn smooth by 5 decades of being carried in Marcus's hands. The wood had started out a warm honey color, but 50 years of oil and sweat and sunlight had darkened it to a deep amber. The checkering on the grip and forend was still sharp in the valleys, but worn smooth on the peaks. The rifle was fitted with a modest, fixed power scope, 4 power, a Bushnell that Marcus had mounted himself in 1975 and zeroed himself and never let anyone else touch. The scope was not fancy. It did not have illuminated reticles or ballistic turrets or parallax adjustment. It was just glass and crosshairs. But the glass was clear, and the crosshairs were true, and that was all Marcus needed. The rifle had a story. Everything Marcus owned had a story, but this rifle had a story that mattered. Marcus had bought it in October of 1974 in a small gun shop in Heidelberg, Germany. He had been stationed there for 6 months as part of a training rotation, teaching West German soldiers American sniper techniques. It had been easy duty, no combat, no danger, just teaching. And Marcus had needed easy duty after 2 tours in Southeast Asia and the things he had seen there and the things he had done there. But even easy duty had not been easy, because Marcus had brought the war home with him, in his head, in his hands, in his sleep. He had nightmares every night, dreams where he was back in the jungle, dreams where he could not find his rifle, dreams where he was trying to take a shot and his hands would not stop shaking and the target would see him and shoot first. He would wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, reaching for a weapon that was not there, and his hands shook. All day, every day. He could not hold a coffee cup without spilling it, could not sign his name without the letters looking like a child's scrawl, could not eat soup because the spoon rattled against the bowl. He had gone to the base doctor. The doctor had said it was nerves, stress, combat fatigue. The doctor had prescribed pills. Marcus had taken the pills. The pills made him tired, made him foggy, but they did not stop the shaking. Gloria had come to visit him in Heidelberg in October. She had taken 2 weeks off from her teaching job, used her savings to buy a plane ticket. It had been the first time she had ever left the United States. She had been nervous on the plane, nervous in the airport. But when Marcus had met her at the gate and taken her in his arms, she had relaxed. And she had said, "Marcus, honey, I am here now. We are going to figure this out." They had spent the first week just being together, walking around the old city, eating at cafes, sitting by the Neckar River. And Gloria had watched Marcus try to drink coffee and spill it, try to cut his food and fumble with the knife, try to button his shirt and struggle with the buttons. And she had not said anything, had not offered to help, had not made him feel worse than he already felt. She had just watched and waited. On the Saturday of her second week, Gloria had said, "Marcus, honey, I want you to take me to a gun shop." Marcus had said, "Why?" And Gloria had said, "Because you need to shoot something. Not a person, not a target that looks like a person, just something simple, a tin can, a piece of wood, something that does not mean anything, something that is just a thing." Marcus had said, "Sweetheart, I cannot shoot. I cannot hold a rifle steady." Gloria had said, "Then we will find a rifle you can hold steady. Come on, take me to a gun shop." So Marcus had taken her to a small shop in the old part of the city. The shop was run by an old man named Herr Fischer, who spoke English with a thick accent and who sold hunting rifles and air rifles and pistols. Gloria had walked around the shop looking at rifles, asking Herr Fischer questions. "What is this one for? What is that one for? How much does it weigh? How much does it cost?" And finally, she had stopped in front of a Diana Model 35 air rifle. She had picked it up, felt the weight, shouldered it, and then she had said to Marcus, "Honey, try this one." Marcus had taken the rifle. It was light, less than 8 pounds. The balance was good, and when he shouldered it, something in his body remembered. The cheek weld, the sight picture, the way his finger found the trigger. He had stood there in the shop with the rifle shouldered for maybe 30 seconds, and his hands had been steady. Gloria had seen it. She had said, "Herr Fischer, how much is this rifle?" Herr Fisher had said 240 Deutschmarks. Gloria had done the math in her head. 240 Deutschmarks was about $100 American, which was a lot of money in 1974, which was almost a month of her teaching salary. But Gloria had not hesitated. She had opened her purse and counted out the bills and paid for the rifle. And then she had turned to Marcus and said, "Marcus, honey, this rifle is for you, but you are not going to use it to shoot people. You are going to use it to shoot tin cans every morning for as long as it takes until your hands stop shaking. Do you understand?" Marcus had nodded, and Gloria had said, "Good. Now let us go back to your apartment and find some tin cans." They had set up a makeshift range in the courtyard behind Marcus's apartment building. 25 yards, tin cans on a wooden crate. And that Sunday morning, Marcus had loaded the rifle with a single pellet and taken aim at the first can. His hands had shaken. The crosshairs had wobbled, and he had missed. The pellet had hit the wall behind the cans with a soft thunk. Gloria had been standing behind him. She had said, "That is all right, honey. Shoot again." So Marcus had loaded another pellet, aimed, fired, missed again. He had done this 10 times, 10 misses, and then he had lowered the rifle and said, "Gloria, I cannot do this. I am broken." Gloria had walked up to him, had taken his face in her hands, had looked him in the eyes, and she had said, "Marcus Delano Coleman, you are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference. Broken means it cannot be fixed. Healing means it is fixing itself, and healing takes time. Now pick up that rifle and shoot again." Marcus had shot again, and again, and again, every morning for the next 3 months. By the time Gloria went back to the States, Marcus was hitting the cans. Not every time, but most times, and his hands had stopped shaking quite so much. He could hold a coffee cup. He could button his shirt. He could sign his name. By the time Marcus rotated back to the States in the spring of 1975, his hands were steady. The nightmares were less frequent, and he had a rifle that had saved his life in a way that had nothing to do with killing. When Marcus got home, he had brought the rifle with him, and he had kept shooting tin cans. In the backyard of the house he and Gloria rented, in the backyard of the house they bought, and eventually in the backyard of the cabin they built. For 50 years, Marcus had shot that rifle, and for 50 years it had reminded him of what Gloria had said. "You are not broken, you are healing." And now Marcus walked back across the gravel lot of Ironwood Long Range, with the rifle held loose in his right hand, muzzle down the way a man carries a tool he has carried 1,000 times. And he approached the firing line from behind. Jamal Patterson was still holding court. He had lowered his phone and was explaining to two other shooters why the Whisper was a flawed target design. His voice taking on the slightly defensive tone of a man who has just failed at something in public and needs to prove the failure was not his fault. "The problem is not me," he was saying. "The problem is the design. There is no way to predict the swing. The chain introduces too many variables: wind, vibration, harmonics. It is chaos theory. You cannot solve chaos." One of the other shooters, a younger guy, maybe 22 years old, said, "But dude, somebody hit it. 4 people have hit it." Jamal shook his head. "Luck, man. Pure luck. I guarantee those guys took like 50 shots before they got one to land. This is not skill. This is lottery." Marcus stopped about 6 feet behind Jamal and cleared his throat politely. "The way you clear your throat in a church." Jamal turned around. He saw the old man in the faded canvas jacket. He saw the air rifle, and because Jamal Patterson was in his heart a decent young man who had not yet done enough hard living to have his arrogance properly sanded down, the first thing he did was grin. "Sir, respectfully, that is a pellet gun." Marcus nodded once. "Yes, it is." Jamal glanced at his friends, then back at Marcus, the grin getting wider. "Sir, are you serious right now? You want to shoot at the Whisper with a pellet gun?" Marcus nodded again. "If nobody minds, I will only take one shot. Will not take long." Jamal's grin got even wider. The easy, uncomplicated grin of a young man who was about to get some tremendous free content for his next video. He raised his phone and started recording again. Oh man, this is gold. Hold on. He turned the camera to Marcus. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new challenger. This gentleman and I am sorry. Sir, I did not catch your name. Marcus said Coleman. Jamal said Mr. Coleman here has decided to take on the Whisper with what appears to be a vintage pellet rifle. Sir, how old is that rifle? Marcus said 1974. Jamal's eyebrows went up. 1974. Wow. Okay. That is older than I am. That is older than most of these rifles here. And you think you can hit a 2-inch plate at 75 yards on a swinging chain in a crosswind with a 50-year-old pellet gun? Marcus looked at Jamal, looked at the camera, looked back at Jamal, and said, I do not know, but I would like to try. Jamal laughed, not a mean laugh, just an honest surprise laugh. He said, Sir, I respect that. I respect the confidence. And you know what? In honor of that confidence, if you hit that target, I will personally give you my $500 bet right here, right now. Deal. Marcus said, I am not here for money, son. I am just here to shoot. Jamal said, I know, sir, I know. But still, you hit it and the money's yours. Fair is fair. Now come on up. The line is yours. Hey, Marcus, he called to one of his friends. Clear the bench for Mr. Coleman, old-timer coming through. The other shooters cleared politely, some smirking, but not unkindly. This was good entertainment. This was the kind of thing they would talk about later. Remember that old dude who tried to hit the Whisper with a pellet gun? Classic. And the small crowd that had been watching Jamal struggle with the Whisper now shifted its attention to the old man in the faded canvas jacket. Someone in the back of the crowd, a stocky older man in a gray flannel shirt and reading glasses pushed up on top of his head, had been turning his face slightly away from the firing line to speak to a friend. He was saying something about needing to get home before noon because he had promised his wife he would help her move some furniture. But at the sound of Marcus's voice clearing his throat, the older man in the flannel turned back. And he saw Marcus, and his mouth opened slightly, and his reading glasses slipped down off the top of his head and landed on the bridge of his nose. And he did not bother to push them back up because he had just recognized from a distance of 50 feet the last man he had ever expected to see standing on a civilian firing line in western North Carolina in October of 2024. The older man's name was Robert Francis Sullivan. Most people called him Bobby. He had been a command sergeant major in the United States Army before he retired in 2014 after 26 years of service. Bobby was 57 years old now. Irish American, red hair gone mostly gray, broad shoulders starting to round, hands marked with old scars from hard work and rough living. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in South Boston, had joined the Army at 18 because college was not an option, and staying in Boston meant either working construction, like his father, or working the docks, like his uncles, and Bobby had wanted something different. The Army had been good to Bobby Sullivan, had taught him his discipline, had taught him leadership, had given him purpose. He had served in infantry units all over the world: Germany, Korea, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan. He had been promoted steadily, had made sergeant by 24, staff sergeant by 28, sergeant first class by 32, master sergeant by 36, and finally command sergeant major by 42. And in 1989, when Bobby Sullivan had been a 22-year-old corporal trying to figure out what the hell he was doing with his life, the Army had sent him to the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning, Georgia. And the lead instructor of his course had been a quiet, lean African-American senior non-commissioned officer named Master Sergeant Marcus Coleman. Bobby had never forgotten Marcus Coleman. You did not forget a man like that. You did not forget the way he moved, slow and deliberate, like every motion had been thought through 3 moves in advance. You did not forget the way he spoke, quiet, no wasted words, every sentence landing like a hammer on a nail. You did not forget the way he taught, not by lecturing, but by showing, and then by asking questions that made you figure it out yourself. Marcus Coleman had taught Bobby Sullivan two things at sniper school that Bobby had carried with him for 36 years. The first thing was how to read wind, not with a wind meter, not with a flag, but with grass, with dust, with the feel of air on your skin. Marcus had taken the students out onto the range on the second day of the course, and he had said, "Lie down, close your eyes, tell me which direction the wind is coming from." And most of the students had guessed wrong because they were trying to think about it instead of feel it. Marcus had said the wind will tell you everything you need to know if you listen to it, but you cannot listen if you are thinking. You have to quiet your mind. You have to become part of the wind. You have to stop being separate from it. And then he had walked each student through the process, teaching them to pay attention to how the wind felt on different parts of their face, their forehead, their cheeks, their neck, teaching them to notice how the grass moved. Fast movement meant strong wind. Slow movement meant light wind. Circular movement meant turbulent wind. By the end of the week, every student could tell wind direction and approximate wind speed with their eyes closed. And Bobby Sullivan had taken that skill with him through his entire military career, had used it in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in training ranges all over the world. And every time he read the wind, he thought of Marcus Coleman. The second thing Marcus had taught Bobby was about the word impossible. It had happened on the third day of the course. They had been on the range doing unknown distance drills. The instructors would call out a target. The students would range it, calculate the wind, dial their scopes, and take the shot. Bobby had been doing well. He had hit 7 targets in a row. He was feeling confident, feeling like he had this figured out. And then Marcus had called out a target at 800 meters. It was a small plate, maybe 12 inches, partially obscured by brush, in a gully, with a strong crosswind. Bobby had looked at the target through his scope, had done his calculations, and then he had lowered his rifle and said, "Master Sergeant, I do not think I can make that shot. The wind is too variable. The target is too small. I think it is impossible." Marcus had walked over to Bobby, had squatted down next to him, and had said in that quiet voice, "Corporal Sullivan, let me ask you a question. What does the word impossible mean to you?" Bobby had thought about it, and he had said, "I guess it means something that cannot be done." Marcus had nodded, and then he had said, "And who told you this shot cannot be done?" Bobby had said, "Nobody told me, Master Sergeant. I just think it is too hard." Marcus had said, "So you decided on your own that it is impossible." Bobby had said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." And Marcus had said, "I see. So what you are telling me is that you looked at a hard problem, and instead of trying to solve it, you decided to give yourself permission to quit by calling it impossible. Is that about right?" Bobby had felt his face get hot, because that was exactly right. He had been looking for an excuse not to try, and the word impossible had given him that excuse. He had said, "Master Sergeant, I am sorry. That was weak of me." Marcus had said it was not weak, Corporal. It was human. We all do it. We all look at hard things and try to find a way out. But here's what I want you to understand. The word impossible is a word that small men use to make their own failures sound like laws of physics. When a man says something is impossible, what he is really saying is, "I am not good enough to do this." But instead of admitting that he blames the task, he says the task is impossible. That way his failure is not his fault. It is the universe's fault. Do you see the difference? Bobby had said, "Yes, Master Sergeant. I see it." Marcus had said, "Good. Now I want you to take that shot. And I do not care if you hit or miss. I care that you try, because the only real failure is not trying. Do you understand?" Bobby had said, "Yes, Master Sergeant," and he had taken the shot, and he had missed. The bullet had hit low and left, but Marcus had said, "Good. Now you know what does not work. Adjust and shoot again." Bobby had adjusted, had aimed higher and more into the wind, and he had shot again. And that time he had hit. The plate had rung clear as a bell, and Marcus had clapped him once on the shoulder and said, "Now, you know what possible looks like, Corporal. Do not forget it." Bobby Sullivan had not forgotten it. He had carried that lesson through his entire career, and he had taught it to every soldier he ever trained. The word impossible is a word that small men use to make their own failures sound like laws of physics. Bobby had said that sentence 1,000 times, in 1,000 briefings, in 1,000 classrooms, to 1,000 soldiers, and every time he said it, he thought of Marcus Coleman. And now Bobby Sullivan stood very still at the back of the crowd at Ironwood Long Range, and he did not say a single word, because he understood instantly and completely what was about to happen on that firing line. And he knew better than to interrupt it. Bobby Sullivan was going to watch and learn the same way he had watched and learned 36 years ago. Marcus stepped up to the bench at position 4. He did not sit down. He was not going to need to. He set the butt of the air rifle against the inside of his right thigh for a second while he adjusted the brim of his ball cap against the morning sun. The sun was about 40 degrees above the eastern horizon now, bright enough to throw shadows but not so bright that it washed out the sight picture. Marcus did not ask anybody for a rangefinder. He knew the distance, 75 yards. He had read it on the sign next to the target frame, and 75 yards was a distance Marcus knew intimately. He had shot targets at 75 yards 10,000 times, maybe more, in the backyard of his cabin, at ranges all over the Southeast, in training courses, in competitions. 75 yards was a distance where a pellet rifle was still accurate if you did your part, where the trajectory was still relatively flat, where the wind drift was manageable. He did not ask what the wind was doing. He could feel what the wind was doing, left to right, 8 to 10 miles per hour, gusting slightly. He did not need to see a flag to know that. He could feel it on his face, could see it in the way the grass at the edge of the range deck was moving. Fast flutters interspersed with slow sways. That meant gusty wind, wind that was coming in waves rather than steady pushes. Marcus did not look at the berm flag. The berm flag was 100 yards downrange, too far to be useful for a shot at 75 yards. The wind at the berm might be completely different from the wind at the target, might be stronger, might be lighter, might be coming from a different direction entirely. The only wind that mattered was the wind between the rifle and the target, and Marcus could read that wind without looking at a flag. He reached down and pinched a single blade of dry grass off the edge of the range deck between his thumb and forefinger, held it up at arm's length, and let it fall. He watched the way it fell. It fell slightly to the right, twisting as it fell. That told him two things. First, that the wind was indeed coming from the left. Second, that it was not a clean wind. It had some turbulence in it, some twist. That meant he needed to be conservative with his hold, could not rely on a steady drift. He pinched another blade from a different spot, this one closer to the firing line. Let it fall, watched. Same result, left to right, twisting, consistent with the first blade. Good. That meant the wind was relatively uniform across the distance. No major shifts between here and there. He could work with that. Marcus shouldered the rifle. The weight of it was familiar, comfortable. The stock fit against his shoulder the way an old shoe fits a foot. The scope came naturally to his eye. The eye relief was perfect because Marcus had set it up 50 years ago and never changed it. The crosshairs were thin and black against the gray steel of the whisper plate. Jamal Patterson had stopped grinning. Something in the way the old man was moving had started to land in his gut. The old man was not doing anything dramatic, was not making a show of it. But there was a quality to his movements that Jamal recognized from his own time in the Corps. The quality of a man who had done this so many times that it was no longer a conscious act. It was muscle memory, autonomic, like breathing. The old man's breathing had slowed. Jamal could see that. could see the rise and fall of the old man's back decreasing, going from normal respiration rate to something slower, deeper, more controlled. The old man's shoulders had dropped about half an inch, the tension leaving his upper body, the rifle settling into position not by being forced, but by being allowed to find its natural point of aim. The old man's cheek had settled into the walnut stock of that pellet rifle with the automatic familiarity of a cheek that had rested on 1,000 rifle stocks before it. The weld was perfect. Head upright, eye directly behind the scope. No craning, no twisting, just a straight, clean line from eye to scope to target. And the old man's finger had found the trigger in a way that made Jamal Patterson suddenly unreasonably want to take 3 steps backward. Not because he was afraid, but because he felt like he was about to witness something he was not supposed to see. Something private, something sacred. Marcus looked at the whisper. The plate was swaying in its slow, shallow arc. Left, right, left, right. The chain had settled into a rhythm, not a predictable rhythm, but a rhythm nonetheless. Everything in the universe has a rhythm if you watch it long enough. The swing of a pendulum, the rise and fall of waves, the beating of a heart. And this chain had its rhythm too. Marcus watched the plate swing. He did not try to time it, did not try to predict where it would be in 2 seconds or 5 seconds. He just watched and waited and listened to what the plate was telling him. The plate was saying, I am not your enemy. I am not trying to trick you. I am just being what I am. A piece of steel on a chain moving in the wind. If you want to hit me, do not fight me. Join me. Be part of my rhythm instead of separate from it. Marcus felt his heart rate slow, felt it drop from its resting rate of 68 beats per minute down to 55, down to 52. He was not trying to slow it. It was slowing itself because his body knew what was coming. His body had done this before, 10,000 times, and his body knew how to prepare. In the back of his mind, Marcus heard Gloria's voice. Not imagined, but remembered. A memory so clear it might as well have been real. Gloria saying, Marcus, honey, you do not need to kill anymore. Just aim and breathe. Just aim and breathe. That is all. That is all you need to do. The crosshairs settled on the plate. Marcus watched the swing, watched the wind, felt the moment approaching. Not a calculated moment. Not a moment he could have explained to anyone, but a felt moment. A moment when everything aligned. When the plate was at the extreme right end of its swing, starting to come back left. When the wind was between gusts. When his heartbeat was in the valley between beats. When his breathing was in the pause after exhale before inhale. The shot when it came did not sound like much. Air rifles never do. There was a muted, soft thump from the muzzle, the sound of the piston releasing, the sound of compressed air pushing a pellet down a barrel, almost inaudible under the ambient rifle noise from the other bays on the range. The sound was so soft that several people in the crowd did not even realize Marcus had fired. For about 0.2 of a second, nothing happened. The pellet was in flight, traveling at 700 feet per second, covering 75 yards in just over a third of a second, dropping 6 inches due to gravity, drifting 3 inches due to wind, following a ballistic arc that Marcus had not calculated but had felt. And then the whisper rang. Not a big ring, not the clean, hearty clang of a big plate taking a center mass hit from a proper rifle round. It was a small, thin, clear chime, like a tuning fork struck once and released, like a wine glass tapped with a fingernail. The sound was almost musical, high and pure and unmistakable. And the plate jumped, visibly, the impact of the pellet transferring enough energy to move the steel. The plate jumped back on its chain about 2 inches and then swung forward and then settled back into its slow sway as if nothing had happened, as if this was just another morning and just another piece of wind. The crowd on the firing line did not react for about a full second. They did not react because they could not quite process what their ears had just told them. Their eyes had seen the old man shoot, but their ears had barely heard it, and now their ears were hearing a chime, a ring, the whisper. But that could not be right. Could it? The old man had shot a pellet gun, a toy. How could a toy ring steel? And then one by one they started turning their heads to look at each other. The way people look at each other, it's a magic trick when they know there was no magic, but they cannot quite locate the mechanics. The way people look at each other when they have just witnessed something that should not have been possible, according to everything they thought they knew. Jamal Patterson took a step forward toward the bench. His mouth was slightly open. His phone was still recording, but his hand had dropped to his side. He was not paying attention to the camera anymore. He was just staring at the old man. "Did you?" he said. "Wait, did you just?" He raised the phone reflexively and pulled up the camera app and zoomed it in toward the whisper, checking the plate for a smear. And there it was, a faint gray mark, the unmistakable lead smear of an air rifle pellet impact about a half-inch below dead center of the 2-inch plate, right where the crosshairs had been when Marcus pressed the trigger. A clean hit, on the swing with a pellet gun at 75 yards in a gusting crosswind on the first shot. Jamal Patterson lowered his phone very slowly. He looked at the old man, then back at the target, then back at the old man. He said, Sir, you just hit the whisper on the first shot with a pellet gun." The small crowd on the firing line had gone completely silent. 15 men, all of them shooters, all of them people who understood how hard that shot was, and all of them now staring at Marcus Coleman like they were trying to figure out if he was real. Marcus Coleman lowered the air rifle off his shoulder, exhaled once, a long, slow breath that released the tension from his body, set the butt of the rifle down on the range deck at his feet, and looked mildly at Jamal, as if he was waiting to be told whether he had shot out a turn, as if this was nothing unusual, as if old men hit impossible targets with pellet guns every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And from the back of the crowd, in the clear, steady voice of a man who had spent 26 years telling large groups of soldiers what to do, Command Sergeant Major Robert Francis Sullivan, United States Army retired, said, "Well, I will be damned. That is the second best shot I have ever seen that man make." And every head on the firing line turned to look at him. Bobby Sullivan walked forward through the crowd slowly, because his knees were not what they used to be. 26 years in the infantry had left him with arthritis and bone spurs and cartilage that sounded like gravel when he bent his legs. And because he wanted to give himself a few more seconds to make sure his eyes were not lying to him, to make sure that the man standing at the firing line was actually Marcus Coleman and not some stranger who happened to look like him. By the time Bobby reached the firing line, Marcus had already seen him and had already let out a small, tired smile, the kind of smile a man gives an old friend he is genuinely happy to see, but is also mildly embarrassed to be seen by. Because Marcus did not want attention, had never wanted attention, and now Bobby Sullivan was about to give him attention whether he wanted it or not. Bobby stopped about 4 feet in front of Marcus and looked him up and down the way a soldier looks at another soldier, checking, assessing, seeing what time had done. Marcus was thinner than Bobby remembered, more gray, more lines around the eyes, but the eyes themselves were the same, steady, dark brown, river stones, and the way Marcus held himself was the same, upright, balanced, grounded, like a tree that had deep roots. And then Bobby Sullivan, at the age of 57, came to a version of attention that his body had not executed in a decade. His heels came together, his shoulders went back, his chin lifted slightly, and he rendered a crisp civilian salute, right hand up, palm flat, fingers extended and joined, edge of the hand touching the right eyebrow, the way they had taught him at basic training 40 years ago. And he said in a voice just loud enough to carry to everyone on the line, "Master Sergeant Coleman." "Good morning, Master Sergeant. It is an absolute honor to see you again, sir." Marcus returned the salute the way older men return salutes, with a small nod and a slight lift of the right hand that was more acknowledgement than protocol, more greeting than ceremony. "Sergeant Sullivan," he said, "you do not need to call me Master Sergeant anymore, Bobby. We have both been retired a long time. We are civilians now, just two old guys standing on a range." Bobby dropped his hand but did not drop the expression on his face. The expression on his face was something between respect and affection and a kind of fierce protective loyalty that men feel toward the teachers who shape them. He said with respect, "Marcus, you are never going to be just an old guy to me. You are the man who taught me how to be a sniper, the man who taught me how to think. And I will call you Master Sergeant until the day I die because that is what you earned." Marcus looked uncomfortable. He said, "Bobby, please, you're embarrassing me." Bobby shook his head. "No, sir. What I am doing is telling these young men the truth, because I do not want a single one of them to leave this range today without knowing whose presence they are standing in. Is that all right with you, Marcus?" Marcus sighed. "Bobby, that is really not necessary." Bobby held up one hand. "Marcus, with respect, it is necessary. It is necessary because that young Marine over there with the expensive rifle just pronounced a target impossible. And you just proved him wrong. And he is going to spend the rest of his life telling this story to other young men. And I want him to have the facts correct when he tells it. So sit down, Marcus, please, or stand if you want. But let me say this." And Marcus, who had learned in his 28 years of military service that you could not stop a senior NCO who had decided to say something, just sighed and nodded and leaned the air rifle carefully against the side of the bench. Bobby Sullivan turned to face the crowd. He took off his reading glasses, which had been sitting crooked on his nose, and folded them and put them in his shirt pocket. "My name is Robert Sullivan. Most people call me Bobby. I retired 3 years ago as a command sergeant major in the United States Army after 26 years of service. Most of that service was in units you will not read about in a book and I will not name on a civilian firing line. In 1989, I was a 22-year-old corporal attending the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning, Georgia. The lead instructor of my course was the man standing in front of you now, Master Sergeant Marcus Coleman, United States Army Ranger, retired. Some of you who follow this world closely may have read stories in the years since the records of certain long-range reconnaissance patrols have been partially declassified about an unnamed Army sniper team that operated in the Central Highlands during the war in Southeast Asia in 1971 and 1972. Some of you may have read a particular account in a particular magazine about 10 years ago about a shot taken at 742 meters under conditions that several professional shooters at the time said could not have been made. The shot in that article was attributed to an anonymous source because the shooter who took it requested anonymity. That shooter is standing in front of you. This man, Marcus Coleman. A murmur went through the crowd. 742 meters, over 800 yards, in jungle conditions, in a war. That was serious shooting. That was the kind of shooting that most men only read about. And now they were standing 10 feet away from the man who had actually done it. Bobby continued, "I taught the wind portion of the Army Sniper School for 6 years after my own time through the course. And every single thing I taught in those classes, I learned from Marcus Coleman. He taught me how to read a breeze by the way the hair on the back of my own forearm moved. He taught me how to shoot a rifle I had never seen before by putting it in my hands and saying the same sentence every time. The rifle already knows how to shoot. Your job is to listen to it. And he taught me the one thing that I am going to say now in front of all of you, because I want that young Marine with the 280 Ackley to hear it the way I heard it in 1989. And I want him to carry it with him the way I have carried it ever since." Bobby turned slightly and looked directly at Jamal Patterson. "The word impossible," he said, "is a word that small men use to make their own failures sound like laws of physics." That is a direct quote from Master Sergeant Coleman. Delivered to my sniper class on the third day of instruction, October of 1989. I have not forgotten it. I never will. And son, the next time you are tempted to use that word on a firing line, I want you to remember what you just saw an old man do with a pellet gun. Because the target was not impossible. You just did not know how to read it. Jamal Patterson did not say anything. He was standing very still now. His expensive rifle was hanging loose from its sling. His phone was dark in his other hand. The smirk was gone from his face. In its place was something else. Something that looked like recognition. Like a man waking up from a dream and realizing he had been asleep. The crowd on the firing line was silent. Marcus Coleman was staring at the ground with his hands in the pockets of his faded canvas jacket, looking like a man who wanted very much to be somewhere else, anywhere else, back in his truck, back on the road, back at his cabin where no one was looking at him and no one was talking about him. Bobby Sullivan stopped talking and waited because he knew that Jamal Patterson was a young man with more pride than sense, but not more pride than conscience. And he wanted to give the kid the space to do the right thing if the kid was going to do it. Wanted to let the moment land. Wanted to let the lesson sink in. And after a long moment, Jamal Patterson did the right thing. He turned and handed his rifle off to the nearest friend without looking at him. And he walked around the end of the bench. And he stopped about 3 feet in front of Marcus Coleman. And he stuck out his right hand. And his voice when it came out was not the voice he used in his videos. It was not the deep, confident, polished voice of J-Rock Precision. It was smaller than that, younger than that, more honest than that. It was the voice of a 26-year-old man who had just realized he did not know nearly as much as he thought he did. Master Sergeant Coleman, sir. My name is Jamal Patterson. I was a designated marksman with 2nd Battalion 5th Marines in Helmand Province in 2019 and 2020. I have no business standing on the same firing line as you. I am sorry, sir. I was running my mouth. I called a target impossible because I could not hit it, and that was stupid of me. And I said it in front of a crowd because I wanted to look good, and that was worse. Sir, if you would let me, I would like to shake your hand. Marcus took his hands out of his pockets. He looked at the kid for a long second, looked at the hand extended toward him, looked at the expression on the kid's face. Genuine, humble, open. And then Marcus did something that surprised everyone on that firing line, including Bobby Sullivan. Marcus Coleman smiled, a very small, very tired, very kind smile, the kind of smile a grandfather gives a grandson who has just learned a hard lesson. And he took Jamal's hand and shook it once, firmly, and he said, son, I called a target impossible in front of a senior officer in 1971. He made me do it again in front of the whole team. And I missed the first time, and I hit the second time. And the senior officer said to me, Coleman, you are going to be all right as a sniper, but only because you already know when you are wrong. I have been trying to deserve that sentence ever since. You are going to be all right too. You already knew you were wrong. That is most of the work. The rest is just years. The rest of what happened at Ironwood Long Range that Saturday morning is the part of the story that Bobby Sullivan would later describe to his own grandson as the most important thing he had ever watched happen on any firing line anywhere in his life. Marcus Coleman did not leave. He was going to. He had wanted to. But Jamal Patterson, still holding Marcus's hand, asked him in the kind of unguarded young voice that a man only uses when he has already been humbled past the point of pretending. He asked whether Marcus would stay for 10 minutes and show him what he had done wrong on the Whisper. And Marcus Coleman, whose wife had been dead 11 months and whose cabin in the Blue Ridge had been getting louder in its silence every single day since her funeral, looked at this big, sheepish young Marine in his expensive chassis rifle and his sponsored hat. And Marcus heard Gloria's voice in the back of his head say very clearly, Marcus, honey, that boy needs 10 minutes of your time. And Marcus Coleman nodded once and said, all right, son, 10 minutes. Pick up your rifle. For the next hour and a half, Marcus Coleman stood next to Jamal Patterson at the firing line and taught him. He taught him in the same quiet, patient voice he had used in 1989 at Fort Benning. The same voice he had used with 1,000 students over 3 decades. The voice that did not raise, did not rush, did not judge. The voice that simply explained and waited and let the student figure it out. Marcus did not touch Jamal's rifle, did not reach for the scope, did not adjust anything. He just talked. He talked about how the plate was not one system, but two, because the chain had its own pendulum and the wind had its own timing. And the trick was to stop trying to calculate the product of the two, to stop trying to find a formula that would tell you when to shoot, because there was no formula. There was only feel. There was only the moment when the pendulum and the wind agreed with each other for about a quarter of a second at the extreme ends of the swing. He talked about how a shooter who is trying to beat a moving target with math is going to lose every time, because math cannot hold a rifle. And the rifle has to be held by a body, and a body has a rhythm, and that rhythm either fits the target's rhythm or it does not. You cannot force your rhythm onto the target. You can only adjust your rhythm to match the target. He talked about how the wind that morning was not a steady left to right push, but a three-part pulse. First a gust, then a lull, then a medium push, then the cycle repeated. And once Jamal learned to feel that pulse, once he learned to recognize which part of the cycle he was in, he would stop needing to see the flag because his body would know. Jamal listened to every word. He asked questions, smart questions, not defensive questions. He said things like, "So you are saying I should wait for the lull?" And Marcus would say, "No. I am saying you should wait for the moment that feels right to you. The lull might be that moment, or it might not. You will know when you feel it." And Jamal would nod and think about it and then go back to watching the target. Marcus had Jamal shoot, had him take shots while Marcus stood behind him and watched. Marcus did not coach during the shot, did not say anything while Jamal was aiming, just watched. And after each shot, Marcus would ask, "What did you feel?" And Jamal would describe what he had felt. And Marcus would say, "Yes, that is good. Now do it again, but this time wait one more second." Or "Now do it again, but this time breathe out slower." Jamal missed his first 3 shots after Marcus started talking, the bullets kicking up dirt behind the plate. And Marcus said, "That is fine. You are learning. Missing is part of learning. If you hit every shot, you are not pushing yourself." He hit his 4th shot. The plate rang. Jamal pumped his fist. Marcus said, "Good. Do not celebrate yet. Do it again. Make me believe it was not luck." Jamal shot again, missed, shot again, hit, shot again, hit. By the end of the hour and a half, he was hitting the whisper 3 out of 5 times, which was better than any shooter had done on that plate since Richard Donovan had put it up 6 months ago, which was better than Jamal had ever done on any moving target at any distance. And by the end of the hour and a half, Jamal Patterson was not the same shooter he had been when the old man had first cleared his throat behind him. Something in him had changed. He could feel it. A shift, a settling, a sense of understanding something that he had not understood before. Not just about shooting, but about learning, about being wrong, about admitting that you do not know something so that someone else can teach you. When the lesson was finally over, Jamal tried to give Marcus money. He actually pulled out his wallet, pulled out $500 bills, held them out. Marcus looked at the money, then at Jamal's face, and without any heat in his voice, without any judgment, he said, "Son, put that away before I get insulted. I did not teach you for money. I taught you because you needed to learn it, and because my wife would have been mad at me if I had walked away from you." Jamal put the wallet away. He said, "Sir, is there anything else I can do?" "Anything." Marcus thought about it for a second. Then he reached down and picked up the old air rifle from where it was leaning against the bench. He held it in both hands, looked at it, and then he looked at Jamal. But before Marcus could say anything, Jamal said, "Wait, sir, before you say anything, can I ask you something about this rifle?" Marcus looked at him. Jamal pointed at the stock. "There is something carved in the wood there. I saw it when you set it down earlier. Can I see it?" "Please," Marcus hesitated. The carving was private, personal. But Jamal was asking with respect, with genuine curiosity, not prying, just asking. So Marcus turned the rifle over slowly and held it under the late morning sun so the light fell across the grain at an angle. And there carved in very small, neat letters along the inside curve of the stock, where a right-handed shooter's cheek would rest, were the words, "For my river stone eyes, Gloria, 1974. The letters were old, faded, worn smooth by 50 years of Marcus's cheek pressing against them. But they were still legible, still clear, still there. Jamal read the words twice. Then he looked up at Marcus. "Your wife?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, she bought this for me. We were stationed in Germany. I had just come back from my second tour, and I was not in good shape. I had nightmares every night. My hands shook so bad I could not hold a coffee cup without spilling it. Could not sign my name. Could not button my shirt. The doctors gave me pills, but the pills did not help. Gloria spent 3 months of her teacher salary on this rifle, $240, which was a lot of money in 1974. She told me I did not need to kill anything anymore. She said, 'Marcus, honey, you just need to shoot tin cans in the backyard until your hands remember how to be steady.' So that is what I did every morning for 6 months. I shot tin cans, and my hands stopped shaking." "How long did it take?" Jamal asked. Marcus said 6 months before I stopped spilling coffee, 2 years before the nightmares stopped. Marcus paused. "This rifle," he said, "this rifle saved my life, son. Not in the way you think. It saved my life by giving me something to aim at that was not a human being." "Do you understand what I am saying?" Jamal nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, I understand." Bobby Sullivan, who had been standing a few feet away listening, spoke up quietly. "Marcus, you never told me that. About the rifle, I mean. About Gloria buying it for you. I knew you had nightmares. You told us in sniper school. You said every man who pulls a trigger on another man pays a price. And if he tells you he does not pay that price, he is either lying or he is broken in a way that cannot be fixed. But I did not know about the rifle, about how it helped you." Marcus looked at Bobby. "I do not talk about it much. It is not something I am proud of. Being broken, needing help." Bobby shook his head. "Marcus, that is exactly something you should be proud of. You were broken and you healed. That is strength. That is courage. Admitting you need help. Accepting help. Doing the work. That is harder than anything you did in the war." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe you are right, Bobby. Maybe you are right." The three men stood there in the late morning sun, Marcus and Bobby and Jamal, 3 generations of soldiers, 3 men who had seen combat, who had pulled triggers, who had carried the weight of those actions, and now standing together on a civilian firing line, learning from each other. After a while, Marcus said, "There is something else I need to tell you both. Something I have not told anyone in a long time. The reason I came here today. The reason I almost did not come here." Bobby and Jamal both looked at him. Marcus took a breath. "Gloria died 11 months ago. You both know that. What you do not know is that I am in trouble. The medical bills after insurance after VA benefits came to $54,800. I have been paying what I can, $100 a month, $200 when I can manage it. But I am behind, way behind. And on top of that, I owe $4,200 in property taxes on the cabin. The county sent me a letter 2 weeks ago. I have 60 days to pay or they take the cabin." Marcus looked at the ground. "That cabin is the only thing I have left of Gloria. We built it together in '96. Every board, every nail. She painted the porch. She planted the garden. She sat in that rocking chair every evening for 27 years and watched the sun go down. If I lose that cabin, I lose her. And I do not know if I can do that." Bobby opened his mouth to speak, but Marcus held up a hand. "I am not asking for anything. I am just telling you why I almost did not come here today. Why I almost stayed home. Because what is the point of shooting a pellet gun at a tin plate when you are about to lose everything that matters? But then I heard Gloria's voice in my head, the way I hear it sometimes. And she said, Marcus, honey, go to the range. So I did. And I am glad I did, because I met you, Jamal, and I saw you, Bobby. And that means something. That means I am not completely alone. There was a long silence on the firing line. Then Bobby Sullivan said, Marcus, how much do you need total? Marcus said 59,000. Medical bills plus taxes, plus a little cushion so I can sleep at night. Bobby looked at Jamal. Jamal looked at Bobby. Then Jamal said, sir, would you let me try to help? Marcus started to shake his head, but Jamal kept talking. Sir, please, just hear me out. I have a platform, 180,000 subscribers on YouTube, people who watch my videos, people who trust me. They have been asking about you ever since I posted that first clip of you hitting the whisper. They want to know who you are, where you came from, what you have done. If I tell them your story, if I tell them about Gloria, about the rifle, about the medical bills in the cabin, I think they will help. I really do. Marcus said, son, I appreciate that, but I cannot ask strangers for money. That is not who I am. Jamal said, you are not asking, sir. I am asking on your behalf. You spent your whole life helping others, teaching others, protecting others. Now let them give something back, please. Marcus looked at Jamal for a long time. Then he looked at Bobby. Bobby said, Marcus, the kid is right. You have given enough. Let people help you now, if they want to. And if they do not, that is fine too. But give them the chance. Marcus's eyes were wet, but he did not let the tears fall. He said, all right, but I am not asking for the money. If people want to give, that is their choice. But I am not asking. Jamal nodded. Yes, sir. I understand. I will make that clear. And sir, there is one more thing. I need to tell you the whole story, not just the whisper. I need to tell them about the war, about the 742-meter shot, about everything. Is that all right with you? Can I do that? Marcus was quiet. Then he said, yes, you can do that, but you have to tell it true. You have to tell them I missed the first shot. You have to tell them about the nightmares, about the shaking hands, about Gloria buying me this rifle. You have to tell them it was not heroism. It was just doing a hard thing and hoping you do it right and living with it afterward. Do you understand? Jamal said, yes, sir. I understand. I will tell it true. Bobby Sullivan cleared his throat. Marcus, Jamal, there is one more thing. The range owner, Richard Donovan, he has been standing over there by the office for the last 20 minutes watching all of this, and I think he wants to talk to you. Marcus and Jamal and Bobby all turned, and sure enough, Richard Donovan was walking across the gravel lot toward them. Richard was a tall man, 62 years old, gray hair cropped military short, weathered face with deep lines around the eyes. He walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from a parachute jump gone wrong in '93. Richard stopped a few feet away. Master Sergeant Coleman, my name is Richard Donovan. I own this range. I am also a veteran. 1st Cavalry Division. I served from '88 to '98. 2 tours. And I just want to say it is an honor to have you here, sir. Bobby told me who you are, what you have done, and I heard what you just said about your situation. Richard paused. I would like to make you an offer. Teach a course here. 3 days, precision fundamentals. You and Bobby together, I will pay you $3,000, cash, and I will waive your range fees for life. You can come here anytime you want. Shoot as much as you want, for free, forever. And if you are willing, I would like to put up a plaque at this firing position, right here at position 4, to commemorate what you did here today, to remind every shooter who comes to this range that impossible is just a word. Would you let me do that? Marcus looked at Richard, then at Bobby, then at Jamal. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, I will do the course, and you can put up the plaque if you want. But I keep the rifle. Gloria gave it to me to heal, and I am going to use it to teach others to heal too. Richard smiled. Deal. and he stuck out his hand. Marcus shook it. Bobby clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Jamal grinned. And standing there on that firing line in the late morning sun, Marcus Coleman felt something he had not felt in 11 months. He felt like maybe he was going to be all right after all. Maybe Gloria had known that all along. Maybe that was why she had pushed him to come here today, to remind him that he still had work to do, that he still mattered. Marcus picked up the air rifle and held it in both hands. He looked at the carved words on the stock. "For my Riverstone eyes, Gloria, 1974. And he said quietly, "Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for pushing me. I am going to be all right now, I promise." The drive home that afternoon took Marcus through the winding two-lane roads that climbed up into the Blue Ridge. The maples were turning red and gold on the ridges. The sky was clear and blue. A hawk circled high above the valley, riding a thermal. Marcus drove with the windows down and the cool mountain air flowing through the cab of the truck. He thought about the shot he had made. He thought about Jamal's face when the whisper had rung. He thought about Bobby's salute and Richard's offer. Most of all, he thought about Gloria, about how she would have laughed when he told her the story, about how she would have said, "Marcus, honey, you gave them quite a show." And Marcus would have said, "I did not mean to, Gloria." And Gloria would have said, "I know you did not, but I am glad you did, because that boy needed you, and you needed him too, even if you did not know it yet." When Marcus pulled into his driveway, the sun was starting to drop behind the western ridge. The light was that particular gold that only happens in October, soft and warm and slanted. Marcus sat in the truck for a minute before getting out. His knee was stiff from the drive, but he was in no hurry. He looked at the cabin through the windshield, the cabin he and Gloria had built with their own hands, the porch she had painted gray, the garden she had planted, the rocking chair where she had sat every evening. He got out of the truck slowly. He took the air rifle from the passenger seat, and he walked up the steps to the porch. He stopped at the door and turned around and looked out at the ridge. The light was fading. The air was cold and clean and smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. Marcus said out loud, "Good evening, sweetheart. I went to the range today. You would have been proud of me. I made that shot you always said I could make, and I met some good people. People who want to help. I think maybe we are going to be all right. I think maybe we are going to keep this place after all." He opened the door and went inside. And for the first time in 11 months, the silence in the cabin did not feel empty. It just felt quiet. Marcus set the rifle down carefully on the kitchen table. He made himself a sandwich, ham and cheese, the way Gloria used to make it, with mustard and a slice of tomato from the garden. He ate it standing at the counter, looking out of the window at the last light fading from the sky. That night, Marcus went to bed earlier than usual. He was tired in a good way. The kind of tired that comes from doing something hard and doing it well and connecting with other people. He lay in the dark and listened to the wind in the trees outside. And for the first time in almost a year, he did not lie awake thinking about Gloria dying. Instead, he thought about Gloria in 1974, standing in that little gun shop in Heidelberg, holding the air rifle in both hands and smiling at him. In his memory, she said, "This one, Marcus. This one will heal you." And Marcus had said, "How do you know?" And Gloria had said, "Because I am going to make sure of it." Marcus smiled in the dark. He closed his eyes, and he slept straight through until morning, without waking once. No nightmares. No 3 a.m. wake-ups, just deep, clean, uninterrupted sleep. When he woke, the sun was already up. He made coffee and walked out onto the porch with the cup in his hand. He stood there looking out at the ridge and realized something. He had slept through the entire night. No nightmares, no waking in the dark reaching for Gloria and finding only empty space. Just sleep. And he realized something else. He was not dreading the day. For the first time in 11 months, he was actually looking forward to what came next. He said quietly, "Gloria, I think I am going to be all right. I think you knew that. I think you have always known that." 3 days later, Jamal Patterson posted a video. It was 22 minutes long. The title was "Master Sergeant Marcus Coleman Needs Our Help." The thumbnail was a still image of Marcus at the firing line with the air rifle shouldered and the whisper visible in the background. Jamal's production quality had improved since his early videos. He had learned to edit, to pace, to tell a story. The video opened with the footage of Marcus hitting the whisper. Jamal let it play in real time. No music, no narration, just the sound of the range, the ambient noise, the soft thump of the air rifle, the 2-second pause, and then the clear chime of the whisper ringing. And then Jamal's voice saying, "Oh my God, did he just?" The video cut to Jamal sitting in a studio, the same room where he filmed all his videos, white walls, gun safe in the background, sponsor logos. Jamal looked directly at the camera, and he spoke in a voice that was different from his usual video voice, quieter, more serious. He said that shot you just saw was made by a 74-year-old man named Marcus Coleman. Master Sergeant Marcus Coleman, United States Army Ranger, retired. He made that shot with a 50-year-old pellet rifle that his wife bought for him in 1974. And what I am about to tell you is why that rifle matters, why that shot matters, and why I need your help. Jamal told Marcus's story. He told about Gloria, about the pancreatic cancer, about the $54,800 in medical bills, about the $4,200 in property taxes, about the cabin that Marcus was about to lose. He told about the air rifle, about how Gloria had bought it with 3 months of her teacher salary, about how it had helped Marcus heal from his nightmares and his shaking hands. He told about the whisper target, about how Jamal had called it impossible, about how Marcus had proven him wrong, about Bobby Sullivan recognizing Marcus and revealing his identity, about the lesson Marcus had taught Jamal, about the word impossible being a word that small men use to make their own failures sound like laws of physics. And then Jamal did something that surprised a lot of his viewers. He cried. Not dramatically, not performatively, just honest tears. He said, "I have been doing this YouTube thing for 2 years now, building my channel, chasing subscribers, trying to get sponsors, trying to make a living. And somewhere along the way, I started thinking I was good. I started thinking I had it figured out. I started using words like impossible to explain away my failures. And then a 74-year-old man with a pellet gun showed me I did not know anything. He showed me that impossible is just an excuse, that real skill takes a lifetime to build, that humility is more important than equipment, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is shut up and listen to someone who has been where you are trying to go." Jamal wiped his eyes. He said, "Master Sergeant Coleman does not know I am making this video. He told me he does not want to ask for money, but I am not asking for him. I am asking for me, because I need to do this. I need to give back to the man who gave me something I did not even know I needed. So I set up a GoFundMe. The link is in the description. The goal is $59,000. Medical bills plus taxes plus a cushion. Every dollar helps. Even if you can only give $5, it all adds up." And then Jamal said one more thing. If you are watching this and you think this story does not matter, if you think this is just some old guy who should have saved better or planned better or whatever, then I want you to understand something. Master Sergeant Coleman spent his whole life serving. He served in war. He served as an instructor. He served his community. And his wife Gloria served too. She was a teacher. She taught 2nd grade for 35 years. They were not rich. They did not make a lot of money, but they served. And now Gloria is gone. And Marcus is alone. And he is about to lose the cabin they built together, the only thing he has left of her. So if you can help, please help. And if you cannot help, please share this video, because there are a lot of quiet old men like Marcus Coleman out there. Men who served, who sacrificed, who never asked for anything, and we owe them. We owe them more than we can ever repay. But we can start by making sure they do not lose their home. Jamal ended the video with a final shot of Marcus walking back to his truck after the lesson. The old man moving slowly, the air rifle in his hand, the sun behind him. A simple shot, no music, no effects, just an old man walking away. And it was perfect. The video went live at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. By midnight, it had 30,000 views. By the next morning, it had 200,000 views. By noon, it had 500,000. By the end of the day, it had 1.2 million views. The comments section exploded. Veterans sharing stories about their own fathers and grandfathers. Shooters talking about the lesson they had learned from the video. People saying they had never heard of Marcus Coleman, but they were honored to help him. And the GoFundMe started moving. $10, $20, $50, $100, $500. The donations came in from all 50 states, from military bases overseas, from shooting ranges, from veteran organizations, from complete strangers who had never met Marcus Coleman, but who recognized something in his story that mattered to them. Jamal watched the numbers climb. He watched the GoFundMe counter tick up and up and up, and he started to cry again, because he had hoped people would help, but he had not expected this. He had not expected the flood, the outpouring, the proof that there were still good people in the world who cared about doing the right thing. It took 5 days for the GoFundMe to hit $59,000. Jamal called Marcus that afternoon. Marcus did not have a cell phone. He had a landline in the cabin, one of those old rotary phones that still worked. Jamal called and let it ring 8 times before Marcus picked up. "Hello," Jamal said. "Master Sergeant Coleman, sir. It is Jamal Patterson. Do you have a minute?" Marcus said, "Of course, son. What can I do for you?" Jamal said, "Sir, the GoFundMe hit the goal. $59,000, 5 days. 3,247 people donated." Marcus was quiet. Then he said, "Say that again." Jamal said, $59,000, sir. You can pay off the medical bills. You can pay the taxes. You can keep the cabin. Marcus did not say anything for a long time. Jamal thought maybe the line had gone dead. He said, "Sir, are you there?" And then he heard it, Marcus crying, not loudly, just quiet sobs, the kind of crying a man does when he thinks no one can hear him. Jamal said, "Sir, I am going to come up there. I am going to bring you the check. Is that all right? Can I come up tomorrow?" Marcus said, "Yes." "Yes, son, that would be fine." Jamal said, "I will be there at 10 a.m. And sir, one more thing. The number is still going up. People are still donating. I think it is going to go higher." Marcus said, "What do you mean higher? We already hit the goal." Jamal said, "I know, sir, but people keep giving. It is at 63,000 now, and it is not stopping." By the end of the first week, the GoFundMe hit $100,000. By the end of the second week, it hit $143,000. 3,247 people had donated. The average donation was $43. But there were some big ones, too. A veteran organization donated $5,000. A shooting range in Texas donated $3,000. An anonymous donor gave $10,000 with a note that said, "For Gloria." Jamal printed out all 173 pages of comments. He put them in a folder. He printed a cashier's check for $143,000. And on a Saturday morning 2 weeks after the shot, he drove up to Marcus's cabin in the Blue Ridge. The cabin sat on a wooded hillside with a view of the Western Ridge. It was small and well built. Log construction, stone chimney, tin roof, that gray painted porch. Jamal parked his truck next to Marcus's Tacoma and walked up the steps. Marcus was sitting in the rocking chair with a cup of coffee. He looked up when Jamal came onto the porch. "Morning, son." Jamal said, "Morning, sir. Can I sit down?" Marcus gestured to the other chair. Jamal sat. He set the folder and the envelope on the small table between them. He did not say anything. Just let them sit there. Marcus looked at the envelope. Then he looked at Jamal. "What is that?" Jamal said, "That is from 3,247 people who watched your story, sir. They wanted you to have it." Marcus reached for the envelope slowly, like it might bite him. He opened it. He pulled out the check. He looked at the number. $143,000. He stared at it for a long time. Then his hands started to shake. Not the way they had shaken in 1974 when he could not hold a coffee cup, but the way a man's hands shake when he has been holding something too heavy for too long and someone finally tells him he can set it down. Marcus set the check down on the table. He put his face in his hands, and he cried. Not quiet tears, not dignified tears. He cried the way a man cries when the dam finally breaks, when the weight finally lifts, when he realizes he is not alone after all. His whole body shook with it, his shoulders heaving, his breath coming in gasps. Jamal sat quietly. He did not move. He did not speak. He just let the old man cry. After a long time, Marcus lifted his head. His eyes were red. His face was wet. He picked up the check and looked at it again. He said, I do not know what to say. Jamal said, you do not have to say anything, sir. They know. They all know. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He said, Gloria, honey, I wish you were here to see this. I wish you could see what your rifle did, what you did. Jamal said, sir, she knows. Wherever she is, she knows. Marcus nodded. He took a deep breath. He said, all right, here's what I am going to do. I am going to pay off the debt, all of it. Medical bills, property taxes, get square. That is $59,000. And then I am going to take what is left and I am going to do three things. First, I am going to set up a scholarship, the Gloria Coleman Memorial Scholarship, for children of Black veterans who want to become teachers. Because Gloria was a teacher, and she believed teaching was the most important work a person could do. Second, I am going to donate to the VA hospital mental health program here in North Carolina for PTSD treatment, because I know what it is like to come home from war and not be able to stop shaking. And I know there are men and women out there right now who are where I was in 1974, and they need help. And third, I am going to buy 15 air rifles, the same model Gloria bought for me. Diana Model 35 spring piston, Woodstock, and I am going to give them to 15 veterans who are struggling with PTSD, with a note that says, from Gloria and Marcus, one pellet at a time, heal yourself. Jamal smiled. Sir, that is perfect. That is exactly right. Marcus said, I do not need $100,000, son. I just needed to not lose my home. The rest of this money, it does not belong to me. It belongs to the people who gave it. And I am going to make sure it goes where it needs to go. That is what Gloria would want. That is what I want. Jamal nodded. Then he picked up the folder. Sir, there is something else I want you to see. These are the comments from the GoFundMe, all of them, 173 pages. I want you to read them when you have time. But there is one in particular I want you to see right now. He opened the folder and pulled out a single page. He handed it to Marcus. Marcus put on his reading glasses and read it slowly. The comment said, my name is Raymond Williams, Captain, United States Army, retired. I was one of the 4 POWs rescued in February 1972 in the Central Highlands. I did not know the name of the sniper who made the shot that saved our lives until I watched Jamal Patterson's video. His name was on our rescue report, but it was classified for decades. Master Sergeant Coleman, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I have lived 52 more years because of you. I got married in 1974. I had 3 children. I have 7 grandchildren. I have had a good life, a full life, and none of it would have happened if you had not taken that shot. You missed the first time. I know that because I read the after-action report years later. But you took the second shot, and you hit. And because of that, I got to come home. My children got to be born. My grandchildren got to exist. All of that is because you did not give up. Thank you. God bless you. I hope someday I can shake your hand. Marcus finished reading. He took off his glasses. He set them down on the table. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, I did not know. I never knew his name. We were never told the names of the men we rescued. Operational security, Jamal said, sir, he has 7 grandchildren because of you. All those lives, all that love, all that family. It is all because you took a shot everyone said was impossible. Marcus nodded slowly. He picked up the page and read it again. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. He said, I am going to keep this, and I am going to read it every time I start thinking my life does not matter anymore. The two men sat on the porch for a while. They watched the morning light move across the ridge. They listened to the wind in the trees, the sound of birds, the creak of the rocking chair. After a while, Jamal said, Sir Mr. Donovan called me yesterday. He wants to do a ceremony at the range to unveil the plaque. He is thinking 6 weeks from now. He wants to invite everyone who takes your course, everyone who donated, the local press. He wants to make it a real event. Is that all right with you? Marcus thought about it. Then he said, yes, that is all right. But I want the plaque to say something specific. I want it to say Master Sergeant Marcus D. Coleman, U.S. Army Ranger, October 2024. One shot, one legend. The word impossible died here. Jamal grinned. Sir, that is perfect. I will tell him. Marcus said, and Jamal, one more thing. I want you to film the ceremony. I want you to put it on your channel because I want people to see what happens when a community comes together to help one of their own. I want them to see that there are still good people in this world, people who care, people who remember. Jamal said, yes, sir, I will film it, and I will make sure everyone sees it. The two men shook hands. Then Jamal stood up to leave. But before he walked down the steps, he turned back and said, Sir, can I ask you something about the war, about the shot, the 742-meter shot? Will you tell me about it someday? Marcus was quiet. Then he said, yes, I will tell you, but not today. Today I just want to sit here and think about Gloria and think about all those people who helped me. Today I just want to be grateful. Come back in a few weeks after we do the first course. I will tell you the whole story then, and you can film it if you want. But you have to promise me one thing. What is that, sir? You have to tell it true. No music, no fancy editing, just the story, the way it happened. Because it was not a heroic story, son. It was a hard story, and the difference matters. Jamal nodded. Yes, sir, I promise. I will tell it true. 2 weeks later, Marcus and Bobby Sullivan taught the first Coleman Precision Fundamentals course at Ironwood Long Range. 12 students signed up. 8 were veterans. 2 were active duty law enforcement. 2 were civilians who had heard about Marcus from Jamal's videos. One of the civilians was a woman. Her name was Keisha. She was 48 years old, a nurse. Her brother had been a Marine, had served 2 tours in Iraq, had come home with PTSD, had struggled for years, had finally gotten help, and was doing better now. Keisha wanted to learn to shoot because her brother had told her it helped him, that the discipline, the focus, the rhythm, all of it helped him calm his mind. So Keisha had signed up for Marcus's course. On the first morning, Marcus stood in front of the 12 students and said, I am not here to teach you how to shoot. You already know how to shoot. If you did not, you would not be here. I am here to teach you how to think. And thinking starts with listening. He spent the first 4 hours teaching them how to read wind, not with flags, not with apps, with grass, with dust, with the hair on their own arms. He took them out to the range in pairs and had them lie down in the prone position and close their eyes and just feel the wind on their skin for 5 minutes. No talking, no looking, just feeling. Some of the students thought it was strange. Marcus could see it on their faces. But by the end of the first day, every single one of them could tell him which direction the wind was coming from and whether it was steady or gusting without opening their eyes. And that was when Marcus said, now you are ready to shoot. The second day was about patience. Marcus set up the whisper target and told the students that each of them would get 10 shots, but they could not take those 10 shots whenever they wanted. They had to wait. They had to watch the plate swing. They had to feel the wind. and they could only shoot when they felt the moment was right. Some of the students burned through all 10 shots in 5 minutes. They missed every one. Others waited, watched, felt, and when they finally took their shot 2 or 3 hours later, they hit. Marcus did not praise the ones who hit. He did not criticize the ones who missed. He just said, "Do you see the difference?" And they did. The third day was about listening to the rifle. Marcus had each student shoot a rifle they had never touched before. No zeroing, no practice shots, just one rifle, one magazine, one target. He told them the rifle already knows how to shoot. Your job is not to make it do what you want. Your job is to let it do what it already knows how to do. By the end of the third day, 9 of the 12 students had hit the whisper. The other 3 had come close enough that Marcus knew they would hit it next time. And every single one of them had learned something they would carry for the rest of their lives. One of the students was a man named Dale Mitchell. He was 34 years old, a deputy sheriff with the county. White guy, red hair, freckles. Quiet way of moving that reminded Marcus of some of the best soldiers he had ever trained. On the last afternoon after the other students had packed up and left, Dale came up to Marcus. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Marcus said, "Of course." Dale said, "I have been on the force for 8 years. I am a decent shot. I qualify every year. But I have never been taught the way you teach. You do not just teach technique. You teach philosophy. You teach us to think. And I want to know why. Why do you care so much about teaching us to think instead of just teaching us to shoot?" Marcus looked at Dale for a long moment. Then he said, "Son, a man with a rifle and no brain is dangerous to everyone around him, including himself. A man with a rifle and a brain is dangerous only to the people who need to be stopped. That is the difference. I do not teach shooting. I teach thinking, because a bullet does not care who fires it, but the man who fires it should." Dale nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir. That is exactly what I needed to hear." Marcus said, "You are going to be a good officer, Dale. You are already a good officer, but you are going to be better because you understand that the gun is not the power. The thinking is the power. The gun is just a tool." When the course was over, Richard Donovan paid Marcus $3,000 in cash. Marcus took the money home and put it in an envelope marked Gloria Fund. He was going to use it to buy the first batch of air rifles for veterans with PTSD. He had already found a supplier. Diana Model 35 spring piston rifles, $240 each. 15 rifles would cost $3,600. Close enough. That night, Marcus sat on the porch and thought about the 12 students he had just taught, about how every single one of them had learned something, about how 9 of them had hit the whisper, about how they had all left better shooters and better thinkers than when they arrived. He thought about Gloria, about how she would have been proud of him, about how she had always said teaching was the most important work a person could do, about how she had been right. She had been right about everything. Marcus picked up the air rifle from where it was leaning against the wall of the cabin. He looked at the words carved into the stock. "For my Riverstone eyes, Gloria, 1974. He said out loud, "Gloria, honey, I taught 12 people this week. I taught them how to think, how to listen, how to be patient. I think you would have liked that. I think you would have said, 'I am doing good work.'" And in the back of his mind, he heard her voice, clear as day. "You are doing good work, Marcus, and you are going to keep doing it, because that is who you are. That is who you have always been." Marcus smiled. He set the rifle back down, and he sat there on the porch until the stars came out. A week later, Jamal came back to the cabin. This time he brought his camera. He set it up on a tripod on the porch. He said, "Sir, you promised you would tell me about the war, about the shot. Are you ready?" Marcus said, "Yes, I am ready. But before I tell you, I need you to understand something. This is not a story about heroism. This is a story about failure and fear and luck. And the only reason it has a good ending is because a lot of other people did their jobs right. Do you understand?" Jamal said, "Yes, sir, I understand." Marcus nodded. "All right then. Let me tell you about February 1972. I was 21 years old. I had been in country for 14 months. I was part of a six-man long-range reconnaissance patrol operating out of a forward base in the Central Highlands. Our job was to gather intelligence, watch enemy movement, report back. Sometimes we would direct airstrikes. Sometimes we would call in artillery. But most of the time we just watched and listened and tried not to be seen. Being seen was how you died. In the jungle, if the enemy knew where you were already dead. So we moved at night, we hid during the day, we did not light fires, we did not talk above a whisper, we ate cold rations, we slept in 2-hour shifts, and we tried to become invisible. In February of '72, we got word that 4 American POWs were being held at a small jungle camp about 30 kilometers from our base. The camp was remote, heavily guarded. The enemy had chosen it specifically because it was far from any air base and far from any major road. They thought we could not get to it. They were almost right. Command put together a rescue team, special forces, helicopters, fast movers for air support. The works. But there was a problem. The camp was in a valley, surrounded by high ground. And on one of those hills overlooking the camp was an enemy observation post, machine gun nest, radio, 6 or 7 men. If that observation post saw our helicopters coming, they would radio the camp, and the guards would execute the POWs before we could get to them. That was protocol. That was what they did. The only way the rescue mission could work was if someone took out that observation post before the helicopters came in, silently, without alerting anyone. And the only place you could see that observation post from was a ridgeline 742 meters away. Across a valley, in high wind, high humidity, high heat. And you would only get one shot, maybe 2 if you were lucky, because after the first shot, they would know where you were, and they would call in mortars. And you would have maybe 60 seconds to get out of there before you died. Command asked for volunteers. My spotter and I raised our hands. We had done long shots before, not that long. The longest I had made up to that point was 560 meters. But we were good, and we were willing, and we were the only team available. So they sent us. We inserted 2 days before the rescue mission, hiked through the jungle at night, climbed that ridgeline, found a position, set up our hide, and we waited. My spotter's name was Darnell Washington, good man, from Georgia. We had been working together for 6 months. We trusted each other, knew each other's rhythms, could communicate with just looks. That matters. In sniper work, trust is everything. If you do not trust your spotter, you are already dead. The morning of the mission, we were in position at 0500 hours. The helicopters were scheduled to come in at 0630. That gave us 90 minutes to make the shot. Darnell spent the first hour glassing the observation post through his spotting scope, counting men, watching their routine, looking for the officer. At 0600, he said, "I got him. Fourth side of the post, radio on his back. That is your target." I looked through my scope, 742 meters. The rangefinder did not lie. The wind was gusting left to right, maybe 12 to 15 miles per hour. The temperature was already 90 degrees. The humidity was brutal. My hands were slick with sweat. My shirt was soaked through. Bugs were crawling on my face. I did not move, did not swat them away, just let them crawl. I did the math. 742 meters, 12 mile per hour crosswind, 90-degree temp, high humidity. My rifle was zeroed at 100 meters, so I needed to come up 32 minutes of angle for elevation and hold about 4 feet into the wind for drift. But those were just numbers, just starting points. The real shot would be about feel, about watching the target, watching the wind, watching the mirage, and pulling the trigger when everything felt right. I adjusted the scope, dialed in the elevation, checked the wind again, and then I settled in behind the rifle and I waited. I waited for the wind to drop. I waited for my breathing to slow. I waited for my heart rate to come down. 68 beats per minute, down to 55, down to 52, and when everything felt right, I took the shot. I missed. The bullet hit low and right, kicked up dirt about 2 feet behind the target. The officer spun around, started yelling, started reaching for his radio. Darnell said you got about 10 seconds before he calls it in. Take him again. I did not think. I did not recalculate. I just adjusted my hold by feel. Came up a little, came left a little, and I took the second shot. And this time I hit him. Center mass, he went down. The radio went down with him. The other men at the observation post started scrambling, trying to figure out where the shot had come from, looking in the wrong direction, looking everywhere except where we actually were. But by then, Darnell and I were already moving, already breaking down the hide, already running. 30 seconds later, the ridgeline where we had been was getting pounded by mortar fire. We ran for 2 miles through the jungle, branches whipping our faces, vines tangling our feet. We could hear the helicopters coming in behind us. We could hear the shooting start at the camp, and we kept running. We did not stop, did not look back, just ran. We linked up with the extraction team at the rally point, and we found out later that all 4 POWs had been rescued. No Americans killed. 6 enemy combatants dead at the observation post after we left. Another 12 at the camp. Mission success. I got a Bronze Star. Darnell got a Bronze Star. And for the next 50 years, I carried that shot with me. Not the second shot, the first shot, the one I missed. Marcus stopped talking. He looked at Jamal. That is the story, son. That is the shot everyone talks about. 742 meters under bad conditions. But the truth is I missed the first time. And I only got a second chance because Darnell was a good spotter. And because the enemy officer was slow reaching for his radio. If either of those things had been different, those 4 men would have died. And I would have been the reason. Jamal was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Sir, with respect, I think you are wrong. I think the reason those men lived is because you took the second shot. You did not freeze. You did not panic. You adjusted and you fired again. That is not luck. That is training. That is discipline. That is exactly what you have been teaching all of us. Do not give up after the first miss. Adjust and shoot again." Marcus smiled a small, tired smile. "Maybe you are right, son. Maybe you are right. But I will tell you this. I have thought about that shot every single day for 52 years. And every single day I wonder what would have happened if I had missed the second time too. And every single day I am grateful I did not have to find out." Jamal turned off the camera. He said, "Sir, thank you for telling me that. I know it was not easy." Marcus said no. It was not easy, but it needed to be said. Because too many people think war is about being a hero, and it is not. War is about doing a hard thing and hoping you do it right and living with it afterward. That is all it is. 6 weeks after Marcus made the shot on the Whisper target, Ironwood Long Range held a ceremony. Over 400 people showed up. There were veterans in dress uniforms, families with children, students from the Coleman Precision Fundamentals course, people who had donated to the GoFundMe, local press, county officials, and standing in the front row were Jamal Patterson and Bobby Sullivan and Dale Mitchell, the deputy sheriff. Richard Donovan stood at a small podium near position 4. He cleared his throat and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We are gathered to honor a man who does not think he needs to be honored, but that is exactly why he deserves it. 6 weeks ago, an old man with a pellet gun did something on this firing line that reminded all of us what the word skill really means. But more than that, he reminded us what the word humility means, what the word service means, what the word teacher means. Master Sergeant Marcus Coleman did not come here that day to show off. He came here because he was lonely, because his wife had died and he missed her. And when a young man with an expensive rifle said a target was impossible, Marcus did not correct him with words. He corrected him with action. One shot, one moment, one lesson that every person on this range that day will carry for the rest of their lives. Today we are unveiling a plaque that will remain at this firing line for as long as this range stands. And I want Master Sergeant Coleman to come up here and see it first. Marcus walked slowly to the podium. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt and pressed trousers and his ball cap. He looked uncomfortable. Richard pulled back a canvas cover and revealed a brass plaque mounted on a post next to the firing bench at position 4. The plaque read, Master Sergeant Marcus D. Coleman, U.S. Army Ranger, October 2024. One shot, one legend. The word impossible died here. The crowd applauded. Marcus stared at the plaque for a long time. Then he turned to Richard and said, Thank you. I do not know what else to say. Richard smiled. You do not have to say anything, Marcus. But if you want to, these people would like to hear from you. Marcus looked out at the crowd. He saw veterans. He saw young shooters. He saw families. He saw Bobby Sullivan standing with his arms crossed and a huge smile on his face. He saw Jamal Patterson with his camera up recording. He saw Dale Mitchell. He saw Keisha, the nurse who had taken his course because her brother was a Marine. Marcus cleared his throat. All right, I will say a few words. I did not come here 6 weeks ago to teach anyone anything. I came here because I was lonely. My wife, Gloria, died 11 months ago, and I missed her voice. I missed the way she would push me to do things I did not think I could do. That morning, she pushed me one more time. In my head, I heard her say, Marcus, honey, go show that boy. So I did. But I want you to understand something. That shot I made that day, it was not about skill. It was about 50 years of practice, 50 years of listening, 50 years of failing and trying again. I have missed more shots in my life than I have ever made. The only difference between me and most shooters is I kept shooting anyway. The word impossible. I have heard that word my whole life. I heard it when a senior officer told me a target could not be hit. I heard it from myself when I came home from war and could not stop shaking and thought I would never be whole again. I heard it when Gloria got sick and the doctor said there was nothing more they could do. But here's what I learned. The word impossible is only true if you stop trying, if you stop listening, if you stop believing that the next shot might be the one that lands. So when that young Marine said the whisper was impossible, I did not get mad at him. I just wanted to show him that it was not. Because I remember what it feels like to think something is impossible. And I remember what it feels like when someone shows you it is not. Gloria bought me an air rifle in 1974. She spent 3 months of her teacher's salary on it. She told me I did not need to kill anymore. I just needed to aim at tin cans until my hands stopped shaking. That rifle saved my life, not by making me a better shooter, by making me a better man. And now all of you have saved my life again. You kept me from losing the home Gloria and I built together. You gave me a reason to keep teaching. You reminded me that I still have work to do. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And Gloria, wherever you are, honey, I hope you are watching, because this is all because of you. The crowd applauded again. Some people were crying. Marcus stepped back from the podium. Jamal came forward and shook his hand. Then Bobby Sullivan came forward and hugged him. Then one by one, people from the crowd came forward. Veterans who wanted to shake his hand, young shooters who wanted to meet him. Parents who wanted their children to meet a man who represented something they were not sure existed anymore. Marcus stood there for 2 hours and shook every hand. He listened to every story. He looked every person in the eye and thanked them for coming. And when it was finally over and the crowd had dispersed and the sun was starting to set, Marcus walked back to his truck. He set the air rifle in the passenger seat. He looked at it for a moment. Then he said out loud, Gloria, honey, we did all right today, did we not? He drove home through the Blue Ridge as the last light faded from the sky. When he got to the cabin, he sat on the porch in the dark for a while. He thought about the plaque. He thought about the crowd. He thought about all the people who had helped him. And he thought about what Gloria would say if she were sitting next to him right now. She would say, "Marcus, honey, I am proud of you. Not because you made a hard shot, but because you let people in, because you let them help, because you showed them that even old men with steady hands can still do something that matters." And Marcus would say, "I miss you, Gloria." And Gloria would say, "I know, honey, but I am still here, in that rifle, in that cabin, in everything you do. I am still here." 2 years passed. Marcus Coleman turned 76. He still lived in the cabin in the Blue Ridge. He still taught the Coleman Precision Fundamentals course once a month at Ironwood Long Range. He had trained 340 students. 23 of them were veterans struggling with PTSD. 19 of those 23 reported significant improvement in their mental health after completing the course. Some had reduced their medication. Some had stopped having nightmares. Some had been able to return to work. All of them credited Marcus and the course in the discipline of shooting. The Gloria Coleman Memorial Scholarship had funded 47 students, children of Black veterans who wanted to become teachers. Every year, Marcus attended the scholarship ceremony. Every year, he shook hands with the new recipients. And every year, he told them the same thing. Your parents served. You are serving too. Teaching is service. Never forget that. The 15 air rifles Marcus had purchased and given away to veterans had created their own ripple effect. Several of those veterans had reached out to Marcus to tell him the rifles had helped. One man wrote a letter that said, "I have not slept through the night in 8 years. Since I got your rifle and started shooting tin cans every morning, I have slept through the night 6 times. That is 6 more times than I thought I would ever sleep again. Thank you." The VAA hospital mental health program had used Marcus's donation to start a new program called Precision Therapy. It combined traditional PTSD treatment with marksmanship training, breathing exercises, focus exercises, patience exercises. The program was still small, still experimental, but early results were promising. Patients who completed the program showed measurable improvement in anxiety and depression scores. The VA was now considering expanding the program to other facilities. Jamal Patterson now had 1.2 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. He had changed the name to Precision and Purpose with J. Rock. Every video ended with the same line. "Remember, impossible is just a word. Master Sergeant Coleman taught me that." Jamal had hit the whisper target 5 out of 5 times in every condition imaginable. Wind, rain, snow, dawn, dusk, full daylight. He had become one of the best precision shooters in the country. But more than that, he had become a teacher. He taught 12 students every month, volunteers, people who had watched his videos and wanted to learn. 4 of them were children of Black veterans who had received the Gloria Coleman Scholarship. Jamal taught them the same way Marcus had taught him: patience, listening, respect. And he always ended every lesson with the same sentence: "The rifle already knows how to shoot. Your job is to listen to it." Bobby Sullivan had stopped teaching formal courses. His knees were too bad now, too much wear and tear from 26 years in the infantry. But he still came to Ironwood every month to help Marcus run the Coleman course. He and Marcus had become close friends again after 36 years apart. They would sit on the porch of Marcus's cabin in the evenings and talk about Fort Benning, about students they had trained, about mistakes they had made, about lessons they had learned. One evening, Bobby said, "Marcus, do you ever regret it? Any of it? The war, the shot, the nightmares, everything?" Marcus thought for a long time. Then he said, "No, I do not regret it. I paid a price, but I would pay it again. Because it made me who I am, and who I am is a man who knows how to teach other men not to make the same mistakes I made. That is enough. That is more than enough." Bobby nodded. "That is a good answer." Marcus said Gloria used to say that pain is only wasted if you do not learn from it. She was right about that. She was right about most things. Bobby smiled. She was right about you too. Marcus said, what do you mean? Bobby said she knew you were not done, even when you thought you were. She knew you still had work to do. That is why she bought you that rifle, not just to heal you, to prepare you for this, for right now, for all these people you are teaching. She saw it coming, even if you did not. Marcus looked out at the ridge. The sun was setting. The light was turning everything gold. He said, I think you are right, Bobby. I think she did know. I think she always knew. On a Saturday morning in October 2026, Marcus Coleman woke up at 5:30. He made coffee. He dressed in his faded canvas jacket and his ball cap. He loaded the air rifle into his truck, and he drove to Ironwood Long Range. It was cold. There was mist on the ground. The range was empty. Marcus walked to position 4. He looked at the brass plaque with his name on it. He smiled. Then he walked to the firing line. He shouldered the air rifle. He looked at the whisper target 75 yards away. It was swinging in the morning breeze. Marcus closed his eyes. He felt the wind on his face. He felt the weight of the rifle in his hands. He felt Gloria's presence beside him. He heard her voice. Good morning, my Riverstone eyes. Show me one more time. Marcus opened his eyes. He watched the plate swing. Left, right, left, right. He waited. He felt the moment, and he took the shot. The whisper rang. A clean, clear chime. Perfect center hit. Marcus lowered the rifle. He exhaled slowly. He said out loud, still got it, Gloria. Still got it. He stood there for a moment. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Jamal Patterson was walking across the gravel lot toward him. Behind Jamal were 12 students, young men and women, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes, all carrying rifles. Jamal stopped a few feet away. Good morning, Master Sergeant. Marcus smiled. Good morning, Jamal. What are you doing here so early? Jamal said, we came to learn, sir, if you will teach us. Marcus looked at the students. He looked at Jamal. He looked back at the whisper target, still swinging in the breeze. Then he said, all right, set your rifles down. First, we are going to talk about wind. The students set their rifles down. They gathered around Marcus. And for the next 3 hours, Marcus Coleman taught them the same lessons he had been teaching for 50 years. How to listen, how to wait, how to feel, how to let the rifle do what it already knows how to do. And at the end of the 3 hours, every single student had hit the whisper at least once. When the lesson was over, Jamal came up to Marcus and said, sir, thank you for everything, for teaching me, for teaching them, for showing all of us that impossible is just a word. Marcus said, Jamal, you do not need to thank me. You are doing the work now. You are teaching the next generation. That is all any of us can do. Pass it on. Jamal nodded. Yes, sir. Then he said, sir, can I ask you one more thing? Marcus said, of course. Jamal said, when you took that first shot 2 years ago on the whisper, what were you thinking about? Marcus smiled. I was thinking about Gloria, about the rifle she bought me, about how she told me I did not need to kill anymore. I just needed to aim at something and heal. That is what I was thinking about. And what are you thinking about now, sir? Marcus looked out at the range, at the students packing up their rifles, at the whisper target still swinging in the morning breeze, at the ridge beyond the range where the mist was starting to lift. He said, I am thinking that my wife was right. I am thinking that pain is only wasted if you do not learn from it. And I am thinking that I still have work to do. Jamal smiled. Yes, sir, you do. Marcus picked up the air rifle. He walked back to his truck. He set the rifle in the passenger seat. He looked at it for a moment. Then he said out loud, Gloria, honey, I am not done yet. Not yet. He started the truck. He drove out of the gravel lot. And as he drove up into the Blue Ridge, the sun broke through the mist and turned everything gold. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus heard Gloria's voice one more time. I know, honey, I know you are not done. That is why I am still here. That is why I will always be here until the work is finished. Marcus smiled. He drove home. and the world kept turning, and the whisper kept swinging, and the word impossible stayed dead on that firing line where Marcus Coleman had killed it 2 years ago with a single pellet from an old air rifle and a lifetime of quiet, stubborn refusal to accept that anything worth doing was ever truly out of reach. The lesson Marcus Coleman taught that October morning was not about shooting. It was about something deeper. It was about respect, about humility, about the value of listening to the people who came before you, about understanding that equipment does not make a shooter. Time does, practice does, failure does, and the willingness to keep trying anyway. It was about recognizing that there are quiet old men walking around with skills the world has forgotten how to measure. Men who do not brag, men who do not seek attention, men who just show up and do the work and then go home. And it was about understanding that when you encounter one of those men, the only correct response is to shut up and pay attention. Because they will not be here forever. And the lessons they carry will die with them unless someone is paying attention, unless someone is listening, unless someone is willing to put down the expensive rifle and pick up the old air rifle and learn that sometimes the most important thing is not what you shoot with, but what you learn while you are shooting. Marcus Coleman is still teaching. He is still living in the cabin Gloria built with him. He is still walking out onto the porch every morning with a cup of coffee and watching the mist rise off the valley. And he is still hearing Gloria's voice in the back of his mind saying, Marcus, honey, you still have work to do. And as long as he can hear that voice, Marcus Coleman will keep teaching. He will keep showing up at Ironwood Long Range. He will keep taking students out onto the firing line and teaching them how to read wind with a blade of grass, how to wait for the moment when the target and the wind agree, how to let the rifle do what it already knows how to do. And he will keep telling them the same thing he has been telling students for 50 years. The word impossible is a word that small men use to make their own failures sound like laws of physics. Do not be a small man. Be patient, be humble, be willing to fail, and keep shooting anyway. Because somewhere out there is a target that everyone says is impossible, and the only way to prove them wrong is to take the shot. Not because you are trying to show off, not because you are trying to prove something, but because someone once told you it could not be done, and you believed them, until someone older and wiser showed you that it could, and now it is your turn to show someone else. That is the work. That is the only work that matters. Everything else is just noise. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of the quiet old men in your own life, the fathers and grandfathers and uncles and neighbors who never brag about what they did and never will, leave 2 words in the comments. Leave the words one shot. Leave them for Marcus. Leave them for every man who ever proved something impossible by doing it once and then walking away without making a speech about it. They are still out there. And every so often, one of them clears his throat behind you on a firing line. And if you are smart, you will stop talking and start listening. Because what they have to teach you cannot be bought with money or learned from a book. It can only be passed from one person to another, one shot at a time, one student at a time, one quiet morning at a time. And that is the legacy of Master Sergeant Marcus Delano Coleman, United States Army Ranger, retired, not the shot he made, but the students he taught, not the target he hit, but the word he killed, impossible. That word died on a firing line in North Carolina in October 2024, and it has stayed dead ever since. Because Marcus Coleman showed a generation of shooters that the only thing impossible is the thing you stop trying to do, the thing you give up on, the thing you walk away from before you have given it everything you have. And if there is one thing Marcus Coleman learned in 76 years of living and 54 years of shooting, it is this: you always have one more shot in you. You always have one more try. You always have one more chance to prove that the word impossible was a lie all along. So take the shot, whatever your shot is, whatever your whisper target is, Whatever the thing is that everyone keeps telling you cannot be done, take the shot. And if you miss the first time, take it again. And if you miss the second time, take it a third time and keep taking it until you hit. Because that is what Marcus Coleman did. That is what Gloria Coleman believed he could do. And that is what every single student Marcus ever taught learned to do. One shot at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of patience and listening and feeling at a time. That is how you kill the word impossible. That is how you become the kind of person who makes other people believe they can do hard things. That is how you honor the quiet old men who taught you. And that is how you become a quiet old man yourself someday. The kind of man who clears his throat behind a young person on a firing line and shows them what is possible. One shot at a time.